Hi, I'm Trevor, and welcome to Catching Up on Cinema. If you aren't familiar with the program, Catching Up on Cinema is a film analysis podcast wherein we introduce each other to films, expand our cinematic horizons, and, in essence, catch up on our cinema. So, it is the month of March 2025, and we are in the midst of, I guess, what we're calling Zombie Movie Month, although maybe a little bit of a caveat there. It's more accurately shitty zombie movie month. Although we'll be very fair and balanced heading into this conversation. But you may have noticed we are doing this video style. It's not a common occurrence here at Catching Up on Cinema, but I have here with me a very esteemed guest, a co-worker, essentially, a compatriot, a cohort, a co-worker. This, dear listeners and hopefully viewers, this is Levi. Classic Captain himself from the Red Cow Arcade / Entertainment Discord. Levi, this is actually the first time we're talking. Like, this is the first time I'm seeing you face to face and speaking with you. So it's kind of a big deal. But how's it going, man? Like, how did we find ourselves in this particular situation today? Like, what were the circumstances of this?
Well, to the Catching Up on Cinema land.
All five of you?
All five of you. We could fit you in a good-sized closet. Trevor and I work together in Red Cow land over there in the slobs. And for those of you who are not in the loop about that, it will take too long to explain.
Yeah, what Levi is alluding to here is there is a YouTube channel, which if you're not watching it, if you're not following it, maybe fix that. Both Levi and I do slob work for Frankie and EJ from Red Cow. It's a YouTube channel that they do any number of things. They talk about any number of pop culture topics. Frankie and EJ themselves are both filmmakers, as is Levi for that matter. But what we mean by slob is we both do freelance editing for them. We edit their YouTube clips, and they give us quite a lot of creative leeway, such that it serves as it seems like it's the case with you too, Levi. It's a wonderful creative outlet, like playing with somebody else's toys and polishing them up and returning them in what I hope is an objectively better form, more entertaining form, hopefully.
Yeah, it's one of those interesting things working with editing other people's material. Especially something as like when you're given as much creative leeway as you're given, that, yeah, it's a wonderful, wonderful outlet. You have an audience and an excuse to have fun. It's sort of like trying new recipes. Like you have guests coming over. It's like, oh, finally, I have an excuse to kind of like do something a little more off the wall, or like I get to try something I've never tried before. It's like you're putting in more effort than you would if you were just cooking for yourself. It's like it's also just a great way to stay sharp if you're between projects. It's been a total blast working over there. And of course, if for those of you who are not watching Red Cow, fix that. Trevor is probably the best editor that we have over there. He does incredible work. Allow me to just up expectation even further.
Oh, thanks.
But we love Trevor's edits. We look forward to Trevor's edits. He does wonderful composites that pushed me to be like, oh, geez, I need to up my game. I need to put Frankie in a silly hat. But yeah, Trevor does fantastic work, and that's how we got connected. And at one point in the chat, I don't even know how it came to it specifically. You mentioned you had a DVD copy of a picture called Bone Sickness. And I was intrigued. I was intrigued by this process, and you showed the back of it and how it is like riddled with spelling mistakes.
Yes, it is.
And then I saw there was a director's commentary. I'm like, this looks like a total pile. And how do I see it?
Yeah, that caught me off guard when you asked, and where can I find this pile? And have you listened to the director's commentary, Trevor?
I was specifically, because I asked, I'm like, have you listened to the director's commentary?
Yeah.
Like, have you partook? Because it's, listen, I'm not like a bad movie connoisseur. Like, there are some people who just love, they can't get enough of it. I prefer to watch things that are a little bit better. I like cult movies. I like kind of underground cinema. I like homegrown stuff. They can be a ton of fun. I don't tend to seek them out. But when I hear that first of all, just the title, Bone Sickness, the spelling errors on the back of the DVD case, and knowing there's a director's commentary, that we can know the method to the madness. that it's like, because that's always the biggest question with a lot of these low budget pictures. You're like, why? Why did you do this? Why did you make this decision? And it's like, we can know why. And so it's like that, all of that combined was just fascinating to me. So Trevor dug up somebody's rip of it that was subtitled in Spanish and sent it over to me, and I gave it a watch, and I was captivated.
Yeah. So thank you, by the way, for your kind words. I would hesitate to call myself the best of the Red Cow editors, because you were the best of us, to quote Christian Bale's Batman. No, we're all great slobs. Part of the camaraderie that comes with that has been a lot of fun. I know Frankie has kind of praised our support of one another in the slob Discord. Like, I found it to be a very welcoming environment. Like, everybody kind of lifts each other up. And your point about compositing and stuff, like, I have competitive instincts, but they all run parallel to whatever competition I'm participating in. So it's stuff like that makes me up my game, is seeing your great work and seeing Jason's great work and seeing Zach's great work and all the rest. There's so many of them now. I apologize if I didn't name you like directly, and you're watching.
Finger, this one's for you.
Yeah, but by the way, I counted 4 typos on the back of the DVD case. But a question.
It's not even that much text.
No, it's barely a paragraph. It's barely a paragraph.
Like, you wouldn't have needed a copy editor. You could have just looked at it.
Well, and one of the typos is a word that is utilized more than once as well. So they misspelled it once, but then spell check didn't pick it up or something, because treatment is listed there twice, and for one of them it's misspelled. Anyway, there's 4 typos on the back, and that's a selling point, by the way. But I'm curious, Levi. You yourself are a filmmaker. Before I guess we get to the movie, which may or may not happen over the course of this discussion, we'll see. How did you yourself find your way to film? What was your inroad into that world? And I guess follow up to that would be like, what kind of films what kind of films, or like, what are a few films that are very important to you, or what kind of things do you find yourself gravitating towards?
Well, as far as like how I got into it, it was, I mean, I always liked movies. My first real love was comic books, and sort of the way things were framed and visual storytelling and everything really influenced that. And as I got older, I really kind of started gravitating toward movies, in no small part because of Cinemassacre and Channel Awesome. And it's one of those, yeah, we give them guff. Yeah, we kind of make fun because it's a little crazy out there, but it's like Doug Walker, James Rolfe, and Louis Lovehog made me love my hobbies. And they taught me a lot about my hobbies. Louis in particular gets a whole lot of crap these days deservedly so, because he's a strange individual.
Strange, yes.
He's a strange man. But it's like, I can't deny the passion. I can't deny the love.
Strange, but he knows who he is. And he's gotten to a place where he is unafraid of acknowledging that publicly. Because like he had that one attempt at scandalizing him that he confronted in exactly the right way, where people dredged up his old porn accounts or whatever. And he handled it beautifully, where he just said,
no, absolutely.
Like, yeah, that was me. It was a point. Yeah. It was a thing that I was doing. I've moved on. Maybe it doesn't really matter. It's none of your business.
And that's the thing. It's like the only thing I could say about Lewis is I wish he could see a little bit of the absurdity, just a little bit.
He takes himself very seriously.
And listen, if I criticize someone for taking themselves seriously, I'll burst into flames. But it's there comes a point where you got to kind of laugh at yourself, and I think that Lewis hasn't quite figured out how to do that, and that makes me sad. But so it was a little bit of that helped me, that helped kind of turn this, like, I like art and I like media into not an appreciation, but an exposure. It's like, hey, there's all of these movies from all these different people. And there's all of these stories that are being told. So that as I went out to seek more and more and more and got further along into that journey, I grew an appreciation for it. I grew an appreciation for film in particular and for storytelling. And I learned how to better articulate what I had always felt, but never quite had the words for. And as for how I got into filmmaking, I served 6 years in the United States Air Force, and as a way to kind of get my mind off of the work was a little gnarly. High stress environments. You were working with a lot of people that didn't really want to be there, but they were kind of stuck there. And it was a way to meet people and to socialize and to have a project to work on together. And it was always something, because I loved movies, because I was watching movies in my dorm room and everything in the barracks, because so much of my time was spent doing that. It was like, okay, well, let's try something. Like, is there social clubs I can join? Is there something going on? It's like I was looking up all of this stuff of what can I do, because I'm a Midwest kid and I was living on the East Coast, and I ended up living there for almost a decade, where it was, I'm in the big city. I have no idea what I'm doing, and I have no idea who's around me. And I looked up a group, and they were like, hey, we're a bunch of independent filmmakers and we're making movies. And I emailed the head of them. I'm like, hey, would you be willing to take someone on who has absolutely no experience whatsoever? And he said, yes. So I walked in. At first, they were holding auditions, so I went in as an actor. I'm not an actor. I've done some film work. I've done some stage work. I don't consider myself to be an actor. But it's like, so I came in kind of that way. And then I wrote my first film. We shot it. And 2 weeks later, I shipped out to Afghanistan. I cut the whole movie on my off time after watch hours while I was out of country in a war zone. And I just kind of kept rolling with it. So for the next handful of years, just on my off time and weekends and everything else, I'd step out of uniform and go make movies with my friends. And it was great because we had both amateurs and professionals working it. So we had guys who were doing like real deal stuff, who were working right proper sets, who were like going out of their minds because they're like, I don't want to make more procedurals. I don't want to make industrials. I'm sick of telling people about government contracts and that sort of thing. So they just want to make something fun. And it would end up being that twice a year we would all bring in a dozen scripts, and we would nitpick each other's scripts, and we would tear them apart and put them back together, and we would rewrite and rewrite and rewrite, and then we would say we're shooting all of them. And now they were all short scripts, so it's like it was nothing. It was the kind of thing you could knock out in a weekend or two, but it was still like we were producing a dozen films twice a year. So we were putting out 24 movies, all written and directed by different people, but we were all crewing each other's movies. So it was, if you didn't know grip work, you worked somebody else's set to learn how to be a grip. If you didn't know cinematography, well, hey, this guy needs a cameraman. Don't you have a camera? And you borrow somebody else's camera and you kind of learn how to use that and you go from there. And it was always this rotating cast of, okay, so you're a script supervisor now. Okay, so you're lighting guy. Okay, so you're the one running sound. So everyone learned everyone else's roles. So by the time we got like a couple years into it, because I came in like right at the beginning when they were trying this, because the head of the group was like, this is a filmmaking group where we talk about making movies and don't make movies. I'm getting sick and tired of this, and we're going to start making movies. So it's like I came in right at the beginning of that era. I came in on the first wave as an actor, and then in the second wave as a director. So it's like a couple of years into the process, pretty much everyone knew everyone else's roles. So there was a core of about a dozen of us that were totally interchangeable, but we all had different styles. We all had different approaches, but somebody goes down, you could easily call somebody else. And everyone, we had a communal set of equipment and everything. So if anyone's in Maryland or Pennsylvania, Charm City Filmmakers, look them up. They're fantastic. They are great, great people. If you want to see what it's like to make a movie with semi-professional individuals, some of them who, again, do this for a living but just wanted a break, check them out. They want to help you make your movie. They're going to expect you to put in the work, of course. Like, you know, if you're directing it, you are also writing it and producing it and editing it. But the fact of the matter is that it was just such a great collective of people. And it was creatives who were willing to work with each other. And I went from somebody who knew absolutely nothing about filmmaking from a production side to I was working professionally when I got out of the Air Force. For 2 years, I worked as a professional kind of contract gig worker, doing some corporate sets. I did a feature film. I worked on television pilots and advertisements. I got to work with the Baltimore Ravens at one point. So it's like, it was a lot of fun. And it was a way to kind of give myself an outlet at first because of the work I was doing, but then it became sort of a creative love where it's like, I feel like a lot of kids who are creative tried to write a book at one point. I realized very early on, I'm not a novelist. I'm not good at it. But I learned I was a pretty decent scriptwriter because so much of it could be handled after the fact, because I didn't have to describe every inch of the room. I could just say they're in a room and then do it on set in production.
And then they fight.
And they fight. Yeah. Well, that's always been one of those troublesome things for me is like, okay, how much do I describe this fight in the script, and how much do I leave to the choreographer? Like, is this a separate script? Is this the difference between the shooting script and the production script? And like,
faster, louder, more intense.
Yeah, faster, louder, more intense.
You can save that for when you're shooting.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, that's one of those things. It's like I've written a couple of scripts where that requires action beats, and it is kind of tough to script it because you're trying to properly describe what the action is without just they fight. Because you're also trying to cut together in script writing. You're trying to create an edit in the reader's mind. So it's like, where's the balance here? We don't want to go blow by blow, but we also want to be able to show the ebb and flow of the action so that it edits correctly in somebody's mind as they're reading it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's difficult. It's a real difficult thing because you want to be able to show the push and pull of the conflict and to get people into the conflict and to ratchet up that tension. But you also don't want to be doing the fight choreographer's job where you are describing every single blow and you end up with 3 script pages that are just people getting hit. So it's tough. It's a tough thing, script writing. It has its own niche issues. But the thing is that writing a novel, I found I ran out of words. I found I ran out of interesting ways to describe something. Where in a script, I am allowed to be clinical, and I'm allowed to just say what I mean, and use the dialogue in ways to allude to different ideas, and then lean on my production designers and lean on my art leads and sometimes that's me in the crew, but it allows me to say, I'm just going to put this here, and if it looks good in camera, then it looks good in camera. This says something about the character, just put it down. Because if I was to describe everything in the room in a novel, I would eventually run out of ways to make it interesting. But on screen, it's just there. And there it is. And if it matters to you, and if you notice it, then neat. If you don't, who cares?
Yeah, it's funny, actually. I probably should have mentioned this at the top. Levi actually recently had an appearance on the Red Cow Arcade podcast. He had a 3-way conversation. EJ, Frankie, and Levi all chatted for 3.5 hours. It's a spectacular podcast. I saw some chatter in the Discord praising it as like maybe the best they've ever done. Like as individuals, like between the two of them, but also having a guest. And I have to agree. I'm inclined to agree. It was a really amazing conversation. The flow of it is, there's a simpatico between the three. It's palpable. Like you can see it. Like you can see that you're all kind of on the same wavelength. You all speak the same language, but so what I'm trying to get to here is that this may be the first time I'm speaking to Levi, but I was privy to 3.5 hours of footage of him prior to this. So I've read up on Levi just a skosh. And something that I've observed from that conversation and in talking to you now, is that I think what comes across so strong, like in the way you present yourself in conversation, is one, the breadth of your knowledge across any number of topics. It seems that there's very few subjects that you don't have at least some depth of knowledge to. Your passion, the things that you care about, you care quite deeply about, and it's evident in the way you speak of them. And then on top of that, it's your earnesty. Like there's an earnest quality to the way that you speak, the way you present yourself, that I think is penetrating in the positive way, not the violating sense. But
we'll save that for bone sickness.
We'll save that. Though there will be quite a lot of that a little bit later. But something that I'm trying to get to here through my ramblings is I could totally see that. I could totally see writing a novel presenting those problems to you just based on the way that you talk. Like the way someone writes is not how somebody speaks, but you're very decisive in how you speak a lot of times. There's not a lot of wasted movement, a lot of wasted motion. And you only have one tool when it comes to writing a novel. You only have descriptive language to paint a tapestry of a scene. Whereas a film, and you have quite a lot of experience working in a team environment where things can be delegated, elements can be spoken, elements can speak for themselves. Like a film or a script affords you that. It gives you a grander toolbox to work from. So I could totally see that style of writing. Like writing, I know reading is something that you're very passionate about, but I imagine writing is also something that you derive quite a lot of pleasure in as well. I think that style, I could totally see that appealing to you quite a lot more.
Yeah, it's also one of those things that I kind of, because so much of my life has been working on teams and
Mhm.
I like the team process. I like being a team player. Um and sometimes that's giving orders, sometimes that's taking orders. I mean, it just kind of depends on what it is. There have been so many times when I am on set where an actor makes a decision that is so much better than what I've given them. And I'm like, thank you. Thank you so much. Like, that is wonderful because you've brought something to the table that's so unique and so interesting. Or my cinematographer will do something like that. Or my sound engineer will suggest something. It's just like, because it's always one of those things. I know I have blind spots. Like, I know that there are some areas that I'm not quite thinking about. I made a movie for the college program that I was a part of, which honestly I should make public, if only for the sake of my actors, so that they can use it.
Absolutely.
I don't know why it's been private all this time. I need to just find the one that is good and put it out there. Um, there was a moment where it's supposed to be like a bit of a misunderstanding type situation. Two characters are having a conversation, and one of them through, because I tried to keep the script fairly loose because it's supposed to just be a conversation between these two. And I'm like, I would need you to get the spirit of this, but you don't have to go dead on. At one point, they're like listing another character has been terrorizing one of them in a comedic fashion for like years and years and years. And well, spoilers. I mean, I guess it's only a like 5 minute film. The whole shtick is that these two childhood friends essentially promised they would never fall in love and they would be friends forever, and that would be it. They were like this. They made this promise when they were like 7 years old, and they're now like in their late 20s, and and one guy has been holding to that. So every single date his friend has been going on, he is sabotaged. Like, he has cut battery leads. He has glued his hands to a doorknob. He is like all of this crazy stuff. This big long list of these failed date attempts have all been ruined because he made this promise, because his friend's psychotic. Um, so sort of the big twist at the end is the date that his friend is on now. It's all a sham.
Mm.
So when the girl walks off, he pulls off the mask, and it's Steve. It's the friend. And so there's like this great moment of my actor Matthew against the glass, like Steve, like just yelling out. But so Steve in disguise is describing all of these crimes. It's just like, well, he must really care about you, like trying to convince him that, as this girl, that's going to be this way. And my actress starts just listing off things that weren't in the script.
Mm.
And she's just like, he does all this stuff. He's can't, the airline, and the brakes, and there's nothing about brakes in the script. And you could see that the wheels in my in Matthew's head are turning, and he says under his breath, he cut my brakes. he cut my brakes. And I'm behind the camera just laughing. And I'm trying to keep it in because it's like, that's not in the script. And it genuinely is taking everybody off guard that it's like, okay, so in universe, Steve has slipped and revealed one more thing that was never noticed by anyone. And it's like, well, wait, which car did he cut the brakes on? And it was all because it was an acting choice. It's like this sort of thing comes in. That's a very long, rambly example, but it's a moment that is very funny to me because it comes about not from me. It's because I have created a sandbox and I've created a scenario that not only allows me to make art, but allows my actors to make art, and my cinematographer to make art, and my sound engineer to make art. And it's like, it's this big collaborative thing where if it was all me, that moment of comedy doesn't exist. those characters don't quite come to life in the same way because I can only bring my life experience to them. So it's, yeah, the novel format never quite worked for me because I am not a good enough writer to be able to fully capture everyone and to be able to capture all those different perspectives. But I am a good enough writer to push someone in the correct direction and say, here's what the line is. Here's what I need you to get across. If you need to change it to sell this, I don't care. Just sell it. I'm not precious about this. It's just about getting this across. And usually the actors come through and the cinematographer comes through and you get something pretty freaking cool out of it.
Yeah, I wanted to tell you that I admire your courage in a lot of respects. Like even not knowing you that well. Like again, this is the first time talking to you, but there's a lot of courage evident in the way that you've like gone through life and pursued a lot of the things you pursued. And what I'm alluding to there is, you mentioned in your conversation with Frankie and AJ an arcade job that you had repairing arcade machines. Very similar to working in film. You walked into that not actually knowing how to do the job. You came at it with a student, like a novice or a student mentality, and just kind of rolled with it and figured it out. It sounds like that's a common occurrence or something that a threshold that you've crossed several times in your life. And filmmaking is like one of the most collaborative of processes. It involves a lot of trust, a lot of courage in like assembling people that you have that with, like can trust. But the act of trusting does require some measure of courage. It does require some measure of faith. And it's really remarkable hearing you talk about that process and having engaged in it so many times in your life.
Yeah, it really is just, and again, I think it kind of comes a little bit from military life. You kind of have to trust your collaborators.
Yeah.
Because it's like, if I'm second guessing, we don't have time to second guess everyone else. We don't have time to second guess everyone's roles. It's like if you are on a set that I have brought you on to, and this is assuming I'm in the director's chair, which I wasn't always.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm bringing you onto a set, it's because I know you know your job. And I'm not going to harass you on knowing your job. And I'm going to trust that you are doing what you are doing correctly. I'm going to check in. I'm going to make sure that everything's on track. But if I say that something is going to be this way or that way, I'm going to trust that you are a professional and you are going to do what you need to do. And if you make a call that says, well, so what you asked was this, what I can do is this, I'm going to trust that that's the best way that we can do it. So it's like, you kind of have to. And it's the same way with military life. It's like, if you second guess every single move that everyone's making, well, something's going to go pretty sideways pretty quickly. So it's like, it's the same thing in filmmaking.
Yeah, there's a fluidity to the situation that requires decisiveness. And like I said, that is something I've picked up on, like a characteristic of yours. That's something I've learned is when Levi says he would like to do something and you and you make that available as an option to move forward, it's probably going to get done. Like that does seem to be how you operate. Like this collaboration, for instance, but probably the most public example is the VHS project with the Red Cowboys. Like, it's like, can I do this? Like, is this a thing that can happen? Because if it can, if I may, I will make this happen.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also it's a way of making it real when you ask and you state that you want to do something for me. Because until it's stated and until there's an ask, it's not real. It doesn't exist. It's just a flight of fancy. So it's one of the reasons why it's like, well, technically speaking, I didn't need to ask Frankie if I could put some episodes on a VHS tape. I don't really need to ask people's permission in a lot of cases, but I want to, because now somebody else knows, somebody else is aware, Sly is aware that we're doing this. It's somebody else, it's now on their radar.
Yeah.
And it allows me to have the kick in the pants to say, all right, this is now out in the world to an extent that if you don't do it, someone's going to ask about it. Because it's going to come up again eventually of like, hey, weren't you working on such and such? Or like, hey, how is that going? What's the status on that? Where it's like, it's something that I want to do. It's just a way of holding myself accountable so that it actually happens.
Yeah. Yeah, it's accountability, and I'm much the same way. I'm not as good at wrestling problems down to the ground and resolving them, but having that little bit of a kick in the pants, as you say, like assigning myself a clip for Red Cow, it is a very strong motivating factor to hold myself accountable to getting that done within the standard 2-week time frame or whatever. It is a huge motivating factor, knowing that my name is on a list, and if it doesn't get done, then I'm the odd man out who didn't show up. It's a bad look. It hurts your reputation, and I don't like that.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I've mentioned this several times in the Discord, where it's like hell or high water, I'm getting this done. I'm getting it done under deadline. It's like this ain't coming in late. We have 2 weeks, and it's like, and there are times where Frankie, because he's a conscientious guy, and he's a nice guy, and he also recognizes managing a team and everything. He's just like, listen, what you're doing is not like, this clip is not timely. It can come out whenever. And I'm like, Frankie, I don't think you understand that this needs to get out on time. It's like, because it really is just that, because that's the push forward. It's the propel that actually allows me to say, because it's like, there's 100 things I could be doing. Yeah. The issue that I have is I have entirely too many hobbies, and I have so many irons in the fire at any given time that if I do not set a hard deadline on something, it will shuffle back into the pile. And who knows when it'll get done. It's because it's like, all right, and we'll get this edit done. And oh, look, an antique typewriter.
It's like, I could go tinker for a bit.
I can go tinker for a bit. I can go write something. And, I had this idea of getting a certification in this thing, that thing, and the other thing. And then it's 2 months later, and I'm like, yeah. So there has to be hard deadlines, or else things won't get done. And speaking of things not getting done, bone sickness.
Yeah, bone sickness. So 40 minutes in. so
we talk bone sickness.
Ostensibly, we're here to talk about a zombie film. It's probably not where this conversation is actually going, but, it's a movie review podcast. We'll touch on it. So the movie in question is, of course, Bone Sickness. I apologize for the mirrored camera feed for anybody who's watching this on YouTube or Spotify, but this is the actual DVD from Morbid Vision Films. And I looked them up, Levi. This is from 2004. It was shot on mini DV cam, as is evident in watching it, in 480p or whatever. Morbid Vision Films does have an Instagram account, and our director / editor / makeup guy / everything in between, Brian Paulin, Paulin. There's an accent going on here that unfortunately I don't have a pocket Boston, but it is a Boston accent.
He's a New Englander.
Yeah. He's a New Englander, and actually that was a funny coincidence because this movie came into my life many, many years ago. a friend of mine, still a very good friend of mine. I'm actually going to be seeing him tonight. He cited this movie as the worst he'd ever seen. And he's not like a film connoisseur by any means, but somehow when he was in Oklahoma or something, he came across this movie, like probably on public television or something late at night. And he mentioned it, he described it to me, and I locked it away in the vault as that Bone Sickness movie. I'd like to see that Bone Sickness movie. And wouldn't you know it, there's a secondhand media store. Lovely secondhand media store. I frequent it often in the University District here in Seattle, called Owls. And they have laser discs, they have vinyl, they have cassette tapes, they have DVDs, Blu-rays, VHS tapes. You would probably like it there, Levi, is what I'm saying. You and Frankie and EJ, you guys would probably have a ball there. Anyway, I was perusing the shelves and found Bone Sickness on DVD. I didn't know that there was a physical media release of it that existed, but as soon as I saw it, I was like, I don't care what it costs. It didn't cost much. It was probably like $3. I brought it home with me and I watched it, and there was a lot of scenes that popped up where I was like, oh no, not for Bone Sickness. Like, lady, you're better than this. But yeah, I watched this movie for the first time many years ago. I've long held on to it as, you know, a fun little bit of nostalgia, not my own nostalgia, like absorbed through osmosis or something, just in occupying the same space as a friend of mine for many years. And lo and behold, it comes back into my life in the form of Levi saying, hey, how about that Bone Sickness movie? Because I brought this up. It's a running gag on the few YouTube live streams that I do for Catching Up on Cinema. It's a running gag that the movie Goon and Bone Sickness will invariably make appearances on whatever live streams I do talking about my movie collections. But yeah, Levi snatched it up and said, hey, you mentioned that Bone Sickness movie. Let's talk about Bone Sickness. Let's get into Bone Sickness.
Let's really dive deep. So I actually did look into Morbid Visions.
As did I, yeah.
Their website does not exist anymore. It is totally defunct. And it's funny because watching this movie, so a general breakdown of the plot of Bone Sickness, or the premise of Bone Sickness, for all of you fine connoisseurs out there. Bone Sickness is about a husband and wife, where the husband is deathly ill with a bone sickness, the titular bone sickness. And it's like, presumably it's some sort of bone cancer or something that is like, it's essentially he's withering away. This perfectly healthy looking actor is just like, he's coming apart at the seams. Just roll with it. It's low budget. So they have a mutual friend who works in a morgue, who is taking the harvested corpses of people and like grave dirt, and he has somehow synthesized what he thinks is the cure for like this sickness and death in general. Like, he has like kind of this reanimator type feel to him, where he's just like, he's cured death. And of course it goes awry, and in fact, the cure turns people into zombies. As soon as the best friend who is curing death comes on screen, I'm like, that's the director, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
Like immediately. I'm like, this guy's the director, because he's a bit of a heavier fella with like blonde hair that's cascading over his shoulders, and it was just something about the way he carried himself and everything. I'm like, that's the director of this movie. There is no way it is not the director, and it absolutely is. I'm like, dead on.
Yeah, I think anybody who has seen a film before, as soon as Brian Paulin shows up on screen, it's like, yeah. like there is one person on this set who cares quite a lot more about how things are going, and it is that man. By the way, introduced wearing a 7 t-shirt, by the way. David Fincher's 7.
Yeah, well, and so that's the other thing. There's a running film school joke about you're watching a student film because every scene takes place in a house that's covered in doggone movie posters.
Oh yeah. Pulp Fiction poster on the back of like a dorm.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like there's a heated family dispute between two actors that are on their 15th year of marriage despite being 23, and they have an 8-year-old son, and there's a Pulp Fiction poster hanging in the back. It's like you know you're among film geeks and watching a low budget film geek movie because of all of the accoutrement in their living space. It's like actually the movie's pretty good about that. It's like there's actually some decent interior spaces that I'm like, this looks like an actual home. Like this looks like they found a location. It was probably his uncle's house. There's a particular set of scenes that takes place in like a heavily wood paneled place that has like just ducks and hunting paraphernalia everywhere. I'm like, somebody is at their uncle's house and he's gone for the weekend on a bass fishing trip.
Yeah, I will point out, we did mention this is a New England production. And the reason why I say that's a happy coincidence is I first saw this movie. I was first introduced to this movie long before I had any connection to Red Cow. But as far as I know, Frankie in particular is from that region as well. So there's a bit of a Red Cow connection there. But filmed in, and by the way, I'm citing the end credits of the film, which are very charming, by the way. There's a lot this movie is not good in the objective sense, but there's a lot of charm to it for anybody who's shot something on Shittio when they're a teenager or something.
It has chutzpah.
Yes, absolutely. And actually, I listened to the director's commentary, and it improves the film drastically. Like it helps you view it in a better light. But yeah, filmed in Seekonk, Massachusetts, Attleboro, Massachusetts, and Providence, Rhode Island, from April 2002 to January 2004.
And that is right in the neck of the woods of our dear Red Cow hosts. And
there you go.
It was kind of funny because it was the way it was, just kind of listening to the accents. I'm like, they're in New England, aren't they? Like,
and Levi, you need to know they were flattening it out, because on the commentary it comes out like it comes out to play. Like Rich George is the name of the skinny fellow with the titular bone sickness. Who is basically the Mike Shank of this production.
Really?
Like, oh yeah. He's a skinny Mike Shank. Like honestly, he's the support guy. He's the number 2 who Brian asks him to set himself on fire, and he says, yeah, okay. Sounds wicked awesome. Let's do it. Rich George is not Rich George, Levi. He is so Rich Brian. George.
Rich George.
Rich George.
It's like he's ordering a party platter. And they aren't going to the moon for glory.
I mean, it's borderline Park the Car at the Cobb, like, honestly.
Park the car in Harvard Yard. Like,
yeah. So this whole commentary is that between 2 individuals. I'm like, oh my God, I need a translator. I'm sorry, I'm from Seattle. We speak very flat American English. I don't know what the fuck this is.
It's Chris Tucker. It's like, the hell did you just say?
I mean, honestly, it was actually quite entertaining. The commentary for this movie is illuminating in that it shows, one, they have a sense of humor about themselves. They are not Louis Levhog. They do acknowledge the flaws of the production. There's many technical instances where they actually point it out, where it's like, oh yeah, that half of the conversation outdoors, I forgot to plug in the boom mic. My bad. And things of that nature. Those crop up from time to time, and they freely acknowledge it and laugh about it. The other aspect of it too, though, is that there is a measure of care and investment that's admirable. Or this was shot over a period of, I mean, it was produced like over a period of 2 years, but shot over at least 6 months, maybe even 9. And they frequently mention reshoots. Like they frequently mention pickups where they're like, that kill sequence was good, but I felt it needed a couple more shots, a couple of inserts, or that bit of dialogue was nice, but we didn't get a good close up of her. We should call her back. And they did. So it's like, you know, it wasn't just point and shoot filmmaking. They actually cared enough to review it in editing, go back and try to fix things. There was an instance on the commentary where early in the film, the fellow with the titular bone sickness, I'm going to be saying that a lot. He pukes on some documents. It's a very harsh cut where like his wife or his girlfriend walks in. She's got her blazer on. She's like, I'm gonna run to the post office, take these things out to do something or other. It doesn't really matter. And then he just ralphs into the tray of documents, and we don't see it.
No, we don't.
We don't see it because he erased the footage. He acknowledges on the commentary. He pressed the review button on the mini DV cam and then like fat fingered it or something, and he deleted the take. And they just never got another one. That's why it's not there.
Yeah, that's really good.
I mean, he tries to justify it. He tries to justify it in that there are puking scenes later on in the film, and he's like, oh, you know, it sets you up where it's like it's going to be that kind of film where we don't show the puke, and then they show the puke, and it hits you twice as hard. I'm like, Brian, that's a bit of a stretch.
You get your fair share of the puke later in the film.
Hearing Rich Judge say taking a dump, I was taking a dump. And he's really excited about that bit on the commentary, by the way. He's like, is this the scene where I take a dump?
I love in film commentary. My favorite film commentaries are where it's clear that everyone's having a good time.
Yeah.
And it's clear that people are just kind of kicking back and watching the movie. Evil Dead 2 is a great example of that, where it's just like friends sitting around. What's really funny is that it was recorded for the Laserdisc.
Oh.
And they acknowledge it was recorded for the Laserdisc, and it's on the Blu-ray.
Oh, wow. That's neat.
So it's like all of these running commentary, like all the best commentary tracks were recorded like 30, 35 years ago, and now are being like just updated through time, through all of these different formats. Big Trouble in Little China has an incredible commentary track where it's just Kurt Russell and John Carpenter forgetting they're watching a movie and just talking about Kurt's son's hockey career.
I've heard excerpts, yeah.
For like 15 minutes. In all honesty, but one of my favorites is the Daredevil movie has a great commentary track.
No shit.
It's really fun because it's like the whole doggone crew. So it's like the director, cinematographer, the editor, and like the lead special effects guy. So it's like it's a pretty good chunk of the technical side of things. I don't think they brought in the actors. It's like Ben Affleck was probably off doing something else at the time. But it's so good because they are just totally frank and they are just even keel, and they're having fun with the movie, and they're like, yeah, I really liked how we shot this. I really like how we got this. And then there's like the scenes in Kingpin's office where the backdrop is terrible. And they're just like, yeah, that backdrop is awful. Like we tried our damnedest. We tried. And it's just like, didn't you try? And the special effects guy's like, oh my God, I tried to get the footage we need, and nobody would give me the funds to get the footage we need. So I just got like crappy JPEGs, and I was pasting them all over.
That's amazing.
There's a particular moment I remember, and it's a terrible special effects shot in the film. It's where Daredevil's supposed to be like jumping up the side of the building really quickly, but he just looks like a horrible rubber figure. And every one of the commentary track is like, okay, audience at home, don't look at the screen. Turn away, look away, please. Oh,
yeah. No, see, that's beautiful because like I've listened to a decent number of MCU films, so not Daredevil from 2003, but the Disney era of the product. And you can tell they're on a short leash. Like there's just certain things that they're apparently not able to get into. The behind the scenes featurettes on all of those discs are minimal at best, and it's very surface level. It's not very frank, and I love that they're able to acknowledge what it is and what it was. Like that's what a commentary provides you. That's what it's supposed to be. This is the story. This is how you got what you got, warts and all. Like that's what's fascinating to me. But then there's other kinds of commentaries. Like a personal favorite is Conan the Barbarian. John Milius and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Have you heard this one, Levi?
No.
Oh, it's worth a listen. It's great because John Milius, he is here to play. Like he is all about mythic storytelling, masculinity. Just he is a serious man, a surfer man at that. But Arnold is decades removed from this project, has obviously gone on to have, an amazing career and stuff. And I'm pretty sure he's high as balls and absolutely doesn't remember the movie, other than the instances in which he was hurt. And John Milius would go on these long, flowery diatribes talking about how amazing the costuming, the atmosphere, and its mythic storytelling at its best. And there'll be a long pause, and you'll just hear Arnold say, "Yeah."
I don't know what's happening in this scene.
Is this where the dogs they attack me? Is this where they hurt me?
Is this where we hacked off that actress's finger?
Apparently Grace Jones on Conan the Destroyer was the most dangerous person on either of those sets. Apparently she hurt everyone.
that does not shock me.
No, Grace Jones, it's real to her, damn it.
She's in it. It's like in it. They talk about like Viggo Mortensen was the same way on Lord of the Rings, and everyone's like, none of us wanted to film with Viggo. Viggo was so locked in, and it was he's Viggo. Like,
he's Viggo.
But it's so Bone Sickness opens with I counted this. It's 5 minutes and 37 seconds before we actually get to the movie.
Yeah.
We get 2 separate opening title credit scrolls.
Yes, we do. Sandwiched, yeah.
Yeah, and the opening is you cannot see a damn thing.
Yeah, it's a little hazy.
Anything.
Yeah.
Like it is so dark. Where we have somebody is in a graveyard and the night watchman comes in and he is murdered with an axe. By describing that, I have saved you 3 minutes of your life. And it's like trying to be real heavy on atmosphere, but the problem is you can't see anything and it looks like the opening of a Sega CD game. So you're
brilliant description, by the way.
So you're like, what is happening? And then so we go from that title sequence to the real opening title sequence, which is actually kind of neat. The problem is it just goes on forever.
Yeah. What Levi is describing is an inherent, I'd say, flaw in the structure of the movie. Is it Brian Paulin, our director, did a lot of the effects work for this film. I'm sure he and Rich George, they both built the sets and stuff. George, as far as I know, did most of it. And there is a little bit of indulgence on display here, where it's like, we made these things, we're going to put the camera in front of them, and I'm enjoying looking at them in the edit, so it stays. And it just goes on a little longer than is needed. It doesn't help the narrative progression of the film, what little narrative there is. The director himself admits, I lost the plot. Actually, one of his more bold admissions is that he sat down to write a script for this film days prior to shooting. He got 22 pages in and stopped, which I guess signals as to why there's like a dearth of dialogue at a certain point in the film, where it's just like, we're not doing this anymore. We're just shooting stuff now. We're just making a gore film now.
It really has this interesting, like halfway through the second act, it's no longer a movie.
Yeah, it stops being a movie.
It just ceases being a movie and it starts being an effects reel.
Yeah.
It's almost music video-esque. Like it turns into a Zack Snyder production all of a sudden, and you're like, what's going on? Like, we had a story. So, because the thing is like you have this setup where it's like the husband's sick, the wife is under a lot of tension because the sickness is really like caring for her husband is really kind of getting to her. The best friend wants to help. The best friend is like interacting with like illicit science stuff. And then there's sort of this like lull where there's some like somebody, the best friend's girl ends up eating a portion of the medicine that was supposed to go to the sick friend. So now she's infected. And you're kind of like waiting for something to be explained. Like you're like, wait a second, why does grinding up random corpses and taking grave dirt, why does this change people? Like what, like there's no like explanation of why this is occurring. There's no realization of the, takes off glasses with shaky hands. Oh my God, all of them died of the same thing. And it's some sort of virus that is it. Like there's none of that. So it stops right about halfway through the second act of like where the end of the second act would usually be the explanation of this is why this is happening. And oh my God, we're all screwed. We're like, it's over. And that just never happens, and it just turns into a gore flick for the next 45 minutes. It's crazy.
Grand Guignol, I think, is what you would describe like the last 20 minutes of this movie. Is just point the camera at some blood and gore and stuff, and whatever. We're not telling a story anymore. We're just It's a demo reel. It's a demo reel of special effects and gore effects and stuff. By the way, the explanation as to why they are feeding him ground up bones from pilfered corpses, amazing quote. He pounded out 22 pages. This must have been part of that 22-page script. This was written down somewhere, Levi. This was drafted. This went through a series of drafts. The old Asian woman at the clinic told me this would help. Ground up bones, herbs mixed with milk.
Yeah, yes. It's the moment that I really noticed the accent is the actress that they got slips a little bit. Apparently she's Russian.
Yes, I saw that on IMDb as well. Born in Moscow.
Yeah, born in the former USSR.
Yeah.
But she says it to her husband and she's like, take this, it'll strengthen your boons.
Your boons.
There's a long O sound. It's
your boons.
And I'm like, this is New England, isn't it?
Uh-huh. Yeah, but I just love the phrasing. The old Asian woman at the clinic. The vaguely Asian woman of questionable descent. Of dubious descent.
Because it's like, because back in the 30s and 40s, your explanation of, well, how can somebody do this? It's like they trained in Tibet.
Yes.
In what? Yeah. They trained in Tibet.
Yeah.
Shut up.
No, excuse me, Levi. I'd like to correct that. It would be the Orient, I think, would be how they would phrase that.
You learned something from the Orientals.
Yeah. Like, what is that thing that Frank Sinatra is doing to that man? It's some mystical technique he picked up in the Orient.
Yeah, exactly. It's Manchurian Candidate.
Exactly.
I'm sorry, Ivan. I have forgotten that your country is much younger than ours.
It just goes to show if you shape your hand into that of a knife and strike somebody, they will pass out. It's science. It's Oriental science, you see.
It's the Shatner approach.
It's the judo chop. The martial art which incorporates very little chopping.
It is. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it strikes me. It's like the judo. It's like, that's not judo.
That's probably why it's funny. Is like when it sounds funny, but then there's another layer to it where if you intellectualize it, it's like, oh wait, that is absurd.
And it's just the absurdity of explanations and everything just keeps going further and further into this movie, because it's like, yeah, that's really the only bit we get is that it is the old Asian lady says that it'll work, and that's all. So we have to assume that there's some sort of mysticism that is bringing them back, and it's not pure science. But at the same time, like, it's also just playing into this weird aspect where, again, it's never confronted. because it's like there's sort of a difference. It's just like, okay, we have like 28 Days Later and like Resident Evil and all these sorts of things where it's like these are science zombies.
Yes.
Or you have Romero's Dead, where it's like this is like Wrath of God. Like something is occurring and we can't kill them and we don't know why it's happening.
Yeah.
And this chooses to be neither, and it just kind of tap dances in the middle, because it's definitely not Romero, but there are times where it feels like that, but some of the zombies are and some of the zombies aren't. So it's like we're having trouble categorizing where we sit in the genre here.
Yeah, I would have appreciated some form of explanation, and ultimately what we get is something that, speaking of tap dancing or tiptoeing around, the actual explanation, which isn't an explanation, it's more just an endpoint, is goblins, Levi.
Yeah, it's goblins.
It's goblins. Goblins were responsible for it all.
Well, I'm trying to remember if I actually... Let me see.
Did you probably ran out of gas at that point, was just like, I can't. Like, I'm not going to write the word goblins with a question mark at the end of this note.
Yeah, so I specifically wrote, Alex is killed by necro-goblins for food theft.
For food theft, yes. They were eating the corpses that belong to the goblins who have never been seen in the film up to this point.
Yeah, so there's actually like fairly convincing, like the makeup's actually pretty decent.
It is.
The necro goblins who just suddenly appear in the third act for about 90 seconds, and you're like, what?
Who could have guessed goblins?
You know, I never would have guessed necro goblins were responsible for this scenario. I couldn't have seen that coming. So hats off. My expectations have been subverted.
Ryan Johnson material.
Yeah. Bravo, Vince. Bravo.
Yeah. So on the commentary, and I watched this, I've seen this film many times at this point. On the commentary, the occasional like bits of like supernatural shenanigans that happen in this film, they're very occasional, to the point where it you forget about it a lot, or the movie doesn't draw enough attention to it. It just happens every once in a while. On the commentary, our director cites that as that's supposed to be alluding to the looming presence of the goblins. The scorpions apparently are supposed to be symbolic, like heralds of the goblins. There's occasionally like voices on the audio track that are supposed to indicate goblins. There's that bit where the dresser drawer kicks itself open, and the best friend's wife finds the photos that we never see but are implied to be illicit photos of him shtupping the bone sickness fellow's wife. Opportunity for drama that doesn't really get explored much. Although I do like the bit where she throws the photos in his face. It's like the most half-hearted, just
Yeah.
But yeah, who could have guessed goblins? No one.
Guessed goblins. Like, well, that's the thing. I could just see, it's like there are moments in this movie. So throughout we have these moments where it's like this is clearly not happening, but yes it is, but no it isn't, but yes it is. Where it's, you have these incredibly vivid hallucination sequences. And maybe this is just the nature of the movie being confusing, because that's how I read it.
Yes.
Where it's like there's first of all, there's a long list of things that I'm like, you are not paying these people enough for them to do this. There's a big long list of that in this movie. First of all, there's our lead actress has some tremendous tracts of land, huge tracts of land, and we take the opportunity to show those. It's a rather bizarre scene where she is bathing her sick husband like with a sponge bath, in the tub, and she's like weeping and distraught, but then she like transfers into fondling herself. And
Yeah,
I'm
she
like,
goes
there's a
from
lot of
brushing his
complex
hair.
emotions.
Yeah.
There's a lot of complex emotions going on where it's like fear and desperation and weeping right into like pleasure, and you're like, this is a very there's a lot of conflicting emotions.
There's another layer to it too, because she goes from brushing his hair in the tub, and some of his hair comes out, and she's like, "Oh, okay. I guess I better go touch myself." So that's the transition. So she gets up, she takes her top off, she starts touching herself, and then they have the shot of him watching her with a really dopey smile on his face.
But then he fades away. He fades out. So it's like, is she imagining that he's there?
Yes, she is. And on the commentary, she's imagining it. The director says that she's supposed to be imagining how their relationship was. So apparently that's a thing they did or something. But then the transition is that she reaches over to her zebra phone and calls her guy's best friend.
So that's the weird thing.
Yeah.
It's like there's an implication.
Yes.
There's an implication there that it's like we are trying to escape this horrifying moment by taking ourselves back to the way it was.
Yes.
The problem is it is done in such a strange, off-putting manner, and the the fading effect of the husband.
just
like it's like that meme where the kid like throws up the peace sign, like I'm out, and he just fades from existence. It's like that.
Yeah.
And it's like the transition, and she picks up her zebra flip phone and then calls up the best friend, and you're like, what is happening?
I think what happened was they wanted her to do more scenes like that, and they only got the one. So they kind of had to work with that, because there are several drama scenarios presented by the film that have almost no resolution, where it's like, we're actually trying to have some character and some story here. It's like we have her being desperate, caring for her sick husband, and hopping into bed with his best friend. It's like, okay, that there's some drama there. But then we have almost no scenes with her and the best friend together, let alone getting physical with one another. We have illicit photos that we never actually see. It's all implied, and it all happens off screen. There's even a detective that's investigating the grave robbings, who it's supposed to be dramatic. That's like, is he going to find out? But the problem is we don't actually know what he's trying to find out, or who is responsible for what, really. And it all just kind of figures itself out.
Well, it's rather ironically, we have the bones of something.
Yeah.
And the bones of something, like, it's not a bad idea.
No.
Like, if you were to pitch me the outline of what you were trying to accomplish in this movie, I'd be like, okay, that's a good idea. Like, so what do you have? We have 22 pages across 90 minutes of movie. Well, geez, I mean, if we're going to go by the old adage, I mean, it's, 1 page of script is an hour to shoot, is a minute on film. So what's the other 90 minutes? So what's the other, like, 70 odd minutes of the movie? And they're like, it's forcing my friends to eat worms.
Yeah, it's Rich George eating worms.
It's Rich George eating worms.
Getting set on fire.
Taking a huge dump. And
taking a wicked big crap.
Taking a wicked big crap, and there's what appears to be strawberry jam on the.
It is. It is.
It is strawberry jam?
It's not quite jam. It's frozen strawberries put in a microwave for about 30 seconds, which semi-liquefies them. It's ground up chicken breast and microwaved frozen strawberries.
I correctly identified that. Wow.
Yeah, you've done this before.
I've put jam on some toilet paper in my. I know what that looks like. But so there's a particular moment. There's a few moments here where it's we see where the best friend works, where our director works, and it's in a morgue that's run like a meat shop. It's very, very strange. So they're like bringing in the corpses on chains, and they're like hauled in overhead, and the corpses are already like desiccated, like they haven't been embalmed or anything. Like they're like the flesh is like real.
No hairnet, by the way, on our director.
Yeah.
Everyone else has them, but the guy with the hair down to his ass doesn't.
yeah, exactly. Like, sure, bud.
He's got a lot of pull in the mortuary.
Exactly. Here in this mortuary that has like weird khaki colored walls, and it's just full of metal tables. There's a scene where he's harvesting from the corpse, and he cuts it open and pulls out a perfectly cut set of ribs.
Yeah,
like it's like a charred set of short ribs.
He went to Sizzler.
Like he went to the Sizzler and stuck it in this prop corpse, and I'm like, he just makes like an incision, like bap bap, and pulls out a perfectly cut set of short ribs.
Yep.
And it's like, this is going to make our mysterious cure for my friend that the old Asian lady recommended.
Like, Rich, I'm taking you to Applebee's. You'll be fine.
yeah, exactly. And so that's the thing. It was actually one of the moments that I noticed sort of like the differences in the way it's shot. There's a difference between like coverage shooting and plan shooting, where it's like shooting for coverage just allows you to go like, okay, we get 2 medium shots, so like of each actor and they're having a conversation, then a wide. So the idea is that in editing you will always have something to fall back on. The weird thing is that there's a lot of planned shots, which are like prevised, one and done, like good shots. And usually, especially on an amateur production, the planned shots are like neat, but they're usually not very good. But the coverage is at least competent because it's coverage, because anyone can shoot coverage. The coverage in this movie sucks.
It's terrible.
Like, I don't know how, like, nobody's framed correctly. Like, sometimes people's heads are out of frame. Like, you chop off the top of Rich George's head for a shot, and it's like all of these, but all the planned shots are good. So like in the morgue, there's a tracking shot where we follow Brian as he walks over to the corpse, and it actually looks pretty decent. And it's very, very strange to me that you can pull off some of these more expressive shots, where it's like even sort of some of the shots of our leading lady enjoying herself on the bed, like they look half decent. Some of the planned shots actually kind of work, but somehow the simplest, easiest, nothing burger shots he can't get right.
Yeah, I think it might be mismanaged resources for one. Two is, I think a lot of it has to do with like actually the individual to whom the shot was delegated to. Because I'm sure there are many, many instances where our esteemed director, is actually manning the camera himself, or manning the effects, or having Rich Judge or somebody close to him, somebody who knows what he's asking for. But like the ugliest coverage I picked up on in the film was when our director's wife character, when she's introduced and they have sandwiches together. The framing on those shots is maddening. It's bizarre. He is just smashed into the one side of the frame, and he has no headroom. It's like they set it up on a tripod, shot it, and nobody reviewed it.
It is remarkable. I actually wanted to bring up the sandwich scene.
Yeah,
it's very important because so here's the setup. Brian is in the basement cutting up a corpse. He is harvesting meat off of this corpse. And his girlfriend gets home and says, "Hi, honey, I'm home." And he takes about 20 seconds to clean up the corpse and hide it and come upstairs. Somehow, In the span of 20 seconds of the door opening, her saying her line, and him cleaning up that corpse, she has taken off her shoes, coat. She has prepped an entire lunch. She's like, yeah, I found this meat in the fridge and I made these sandwiches. So these were not made prior.
No.
She has drinks and she has teleported through the house and has a full lunch inside about 20 seconds. And I'm like, what is happening? How is this possible? And then it's so poorly shot. And you're like, the timing of how this is working is so crazy because it's like a scene is missing. It's like there was probably about like 5 or 6 shots of her like coming in and putting her keys down and opening up the kitchen and opening up the fridge and asking, what would you like for lunch? Some sandwiches or something, as he's, shoving arms in a bag.
Yeah.
So it's like, it feels like there's a piece missing, but instead it like teleports forward like a 5 or 10 minute span of time in about 15 seconds. So,
yeah. It does feel like there's something
routine.
Missing. Like just her cooking the meat or something would have been something, because you could like have a slow push in on that to like indicate like some sort of dread where it's like, ooh, that's human meat or something like that. And by the way, she like, speaking of, you mentioned actors sometimes saving the day when it comes to managing the material on the script, like on the page. They did not have that benefit here because she calls it hamburger, and you even on a tiny 480p or whatever stream of this movie, it's not a hamburger sandwich. Like it's very, very clearly not. But it was probably on one of the 22 pages that they had, so she said it.
Like my brain said, I'm like, is it like sloppy joes? Is it like it's hamburger meat that she's prepared? Because it's not a hamburger. It's not.
It's like not. It's just not.
It's like loose hamburger. Like, well, and the other implication here is that Brian is harvesting this meat from human bodies, and then he is processing it into hamburger meat.
Yes. But like we don't see any of that.
Yeah, like this man has a meat grinder somewhere in the house that is used exclusively for like grinding up people's bodies, which we never see. We never see this processing point. Like it's not deeply important, but
wait, doesn't he actually pull out a meat grinder when the lady zombie attacks him? I think he might. Like he jams it in her eye socket, I think.
Oh, geez. Well,
wow, he was ahead of us.
I take everything back, Brian.
Filmmaking genius. He's playing 4-dimensional chess.
Yeah, exactly. He knew we were going to say this. We were going to criticize him for such things.
I'm pretty sure that's what that was.
Yeah. My favorite standout character, woman with the hose. Their next door neighbor who has an inexplicable accent that I cannot place.
She is Australian. That is his mother-in-law in real life.
Oh, okay.
The mustache cop is his father-in-law, I guess.
Okay, so it's a very bizarre situation where like his girlfriend is like talking with the neighbor lady. And so she has like, this thick Aussie accent, and she's just watering her lawn. And she comes back later in the movie to call the police, and then one of the zombies like tears her face off.
That was a pretty cool kill, actually. I've seen that. I've seen that replicated in more contemporary movies, where she's the Snoopy lady next door, where she like calls the cops on the zombies at the end of the movie. She's watching the affair transpire between the married couples next door, and one of the zombies just walks by the window and punches through it and yanks her head through it, and then I think like rakes her throat across the broken glass. It's a cool, like in concept, it's pretty cool. The effect is not one of the better ones in the movie, but it's something I've seen, and like I think that happens to somebody in The Raid actually with wood splinters though, not glass.
Yeah, that's kind of what gets me about this whole production is that there was clearly a whole lot of love and care put into a lot of this.
Yeah.
It's just that everything is so poorly lit and lensed that, and of course the script is non-existent, so it ends up becoming a well, that's kind of neat, but then nothing is really done with it. One of the things that you kind of need to help sell some of these effects, like I think of Evil Dead, where all of these shoestring budget, arguably less sophisticated effects than what is in this film. But there's sound and there's weight to the hits. And, you know, when somebody gets hit, like, goodness gracious, that girl who takes a pencil to the ankle, it's like the sound of it is just so like, like it makes you kind of recoil, even if you know it's kind of a cheap effect. And it sells it. It sells what is fairly simple. The problem is that this movie has some pretty wonderful makeup effects. They really go the extra mile.
Oh, yeah.
But there's no real sound cues, and there's no real weight to any of the hits. So you watch somebody get their freaking face caved in, or like there's a shot later on in the movie where somebody gets hit and it like their head kind of splinters a little bit and they tear off the top. So it's just like the lower part of the jaw. And you're like, wow, that's a gnarly looking effect. It's a shame that I know it's made of paper mache because there's no like sound to indicate it's anything else. So it, and the whole movie's kind of like that. Like there's just a lot of sound seems to be a really big problem across the whole thing. I'm a huge fan of the fake wind sound effects of the cemetery.
Yeah. And the crows every time they're in the cemetery at all hours of the day, you know. By the way, those transitions, just the random cutaways in between scenes of the graveyard, of the headstones, feels like Uwe Boll's House of the Dead, which we reviewed for Catching Up on Cinema just the other week. Also just makes me think of like a loading screen from like Resident Evil or something, like opening a door or something, but it's just like, here's a tombstone. Yeah. I couldn't think of anything to put in between.
Exactly. We're just going to cut to there's a hint on how to properly mic a scene. There's just a lot of strangeness across the movie when it comes to that, where it's like, there's a lot of, and again, in the realm of like high effort, but what the hell, there's a lot of actors around bugs. Like there's so one of the scenes that shows like, oh, these people are infected by this crazy virus, and it's like, oh my goodness, what did you do to me? Is they're like coughing up worms and like cockroaches and stuff, where you're like, so there's several scenes of like Rich George has a mouth full of like worms that
twice. Like, you got him to do it twice.
And you're like, wow, you are not paying these people enough to do that. And there's scenes where it's like, his girlfriend has similar scene, and you're like, he's releasing scorpions onto the set, and you're like, this is crazy. This is like, it's real production value, and it's gross. And you're like, wow, like that actually kind of sells a little bit more than just Kool-Aid strawberry barf.
Yeah. But
also, none of these people should be doing this.
By the way, the scorpions and the millipede are credited at the end of the film. They are pets of our director. Scorpions Vlad, Cthulhu, and Blade. And by the way, Rich George himself points out on the commentary when the camera is transfixed on one of the headstones, it says Frost on it, and he's like, "Hey, that's like Deacon Frost," like from Blade. So apparently they're fans of Stephen Norrington's Blade, and the millipede's name is Dune, by the way. So these were pets And I guess he had enough confidence that they wouldn't sting anybody.
Yeah, exactly. The guy, it's children, animals, and water are like your three rules.
Yeah.
We have two of those because we have several bathtub scenes. We have dueling bathtubs of Brian getting his friends naked so they can film his movie.
The gal was supposed to be naked in the tub with him, by the way. She said no.
Understandable.
She said no, and then he admitted, like, in all honesty, that I didn't realize how small tubs were. So just logistically, it didn't make sense.
Well, it's sort of there's a bit in Batman v Superman where it's like where Lois Lane is like she's taking a bath, Amy Adams.
Yeah.
And then Henry Cavill gets in fully clothed.
Yeah.
Also into the bath, and you're like, this bath is not Henry Cavill sized. It is definitely not Henry Cavill and Amy Adams size.
Yeah, I mean, if I was Lois Lane in that scenario, I'd be like, so Clark, I know you have X-ray vision. Do you have like anti-mold vision? Because this apartment ain't cheap.
Clark, because the camera cuts with her going like, oh, and like the water rising up and going over the edge of the tub, and I'm just imagining the scene like 15 seconds later. It's like, they have a kiss and she's just like, so Clark, you still have your pants on. And also there's no room to move in this tub. And what are we doing? This was a really, Clark, this was a really stupid idea. You have ruined your leather shoes.
Yeah, it's George Lucas levels of stupidity when it comes to exhibiting romance on film. It's like all of Attack of the Clones is just George Lucas saying, "Well, this is romantic, isn't it? Like, they're frolicking. That's what people in love do,
and then Hayden gets knocked over by the giant ballsack creature.
Yeah, the giant ballsack creature with a really tiny head. And she thinks he's dead for a second. Isn't that romantic?
He tries to ride it, but he fails.
Yeah, but he fails. It's like poetry rhymes.
It takes me back to my time romancing my wife in Modesto. There's the drama and tension scenes throughout this movie, because again, knowing now that they go nowhere, it's like, wow, so this is poorly acted and it doesn't do anything.
It doesn't do anything?
It doesn't do anything?
It doesn't do anything?
Yeah. Maha of the bones.
Maha! Sell no wine before it's time.
Yes, absolutely. I actually looked into Parmesan. I'm like, surely it's still around. They make brandy. They make brandy now. It is vile stuff. I am like, I like brandy. I enjoy liquor. And it is. Somebody brought it over for a party. Like I was having a party and somebody brought it over unknowingly, and I'm like, it's Parmesan. Like, and I had a drink of it straight, and I'm like, this is horrible. This is awful. I'm like, we can't even mix this with anything. It just permeates the whole thing. It's like,
well, don't take this the wrong way, Levi, but on the subject of Orson Welles, I get a lot of Orson Welles from you, honestly. I see a lot of the man in you. Not the waistline, as far as I can tell, but there's a bit of Welles in you. There's a bit of Unicron in all of us, but especially you.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I find your bargaining highly dubious.
I love that movie so much. I can basically recite it front to back.
I love there's an interview with Welles, days before he dies. He's talking to the secretary and he's like, I am a giant planet in a children's movie. I'm foiled and destroyed at the end. I don't know what to make of it. There's something like he was just genuinely reflecting. He's like, I've made some of the greatest movies in Hollywood history, and my final role will be as a giant talking planet opposite Leonard Nimoy.
Defeated by Judd Nelson.
Yeah, you're defeated by Judd Nelson,
who went on to have a fruitful career.
Yeah. Speaking of commentaries, Transformers the movie has one of the worst commentaries I've ever.
Is that Vince DiCola?
So the thing is that who dares summon me?
Nobody summons Megatron.
No, I will let that go to voicemail. That is perfectly fine. I have there's my rotary phone is hooked up via Bluetooth to my
cool
to my cell phone, so whenever I'm at home, I can just take calls that way.
Cool.
But, so nobody summons Megatron. So the director's commentary for Transformers the movie is terrible because it is the animation director.
Okay.
Who does not speak English. Like, he doesn't speak English very well at all. So it's like, it's clear that he is like, I'm very glad to be on the commentary. And look at that. like he can't quite articulate as well as he would like to, because you can feel that he's trying to explain how this animation process is, and he starts slipping into Japanese, but then he has to pull himself back into English, and it's clear he doesn't quite have the words for it. But then we have like the actress who voiced RC and like a handful of other cast members, and it is clear that nobody knows what they're doing. Nobody remembers this movie very well, and everyone is like fumbling through it. I actually shut it off halfway through. I'm like, this is dreadful. Yeah. I'm like, this is horrible. And it's like, I really want to listen through this and kind of get some insight. But it's like, it's clear it was one of those things of, we want a special feature for the back of the box. It's the 20th or 25th anniversary or whatever the hell, and we want to get people together, and nobody remembers it. And it is kind of one of the problems of getting actors for an anime picture to come in for a commentary, because they just kind of were in the booth.
Yeah, that's all they saw.
Yeah, where it's like the difference is it's like the anime DC movies, New Frontier has a commentary track, because it is the writing team, the animation team, and the vocal director,
Andrea Romano or whatever.
Yeah, so it's all of them kind of working together on the commentary, and they can provide some real solid insight and sort of the adaptation process. Darwin Cook has his own solo commentary on that.
That's great.
Like, it's good. It's really, really good. But it's like, well, they don't bring the actors in because the actors just read their lines.
Yeah.
It's like, you can't really talk about it in the same way as you do a live action picture. It's just not the same thing.
Also, it doesn't help that, like, I think those Laserdisc commentaries you mentioned, part of the value of them is that they were recorded closer to when those films were made. Not necessarily the same year even that those movies were produced, but they're closer. Like, not as many decades have passed since those people were on those sets. So the memories are a little clearer.
Well, and the other thing is that, like, you were able to get people that you really couldn't get today. The
enthusiasm level was very high because it was extraordinarily novel at the time. Yeah. These days, it's like an afterthought unless you're like into the hobby. Like it's just not what it was.
Well, and that's the thing. There's an edit that seemed to really tickle people because there was a big Laserdisc showcase that happened over on the Red Cow channel that I edited, and I cut in the opening of the very first commentary track, which was for King Kong that they did for the Criterion Laserdisc. And it is, the way the guy describes it is so alien because it's so new, where he's like, I will be taking you through an audio lecture tour of King Kong because the technology on this Laserdisc has presented such a unique opportunity. that you can swap between audio source. Like it's sort of like the moments in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen where they're like, "What is that? It is an automobile." Like it's describing something that all of us inherently know what it is, but because it is such a like strange idea.
Well, he probably doesn't even have faith that it's going to work. Like he's like, so I do this and then it shows up on the movie, but they can still watch the movie without. Okay, whatever. You have me in for an afternoon.
Yeah, I provide an audio lecture tour. So it lends itself to, because you were so much closer to these movies, you could get like some really weird stuff. You could get some weird people where it's like James Bond famously has like a set of banned commentary tracks.
Really?
That only exist on the Laserdiscs because they brought in all these different crew members. So it's like, hey, here we have the scriptwriter and the production designer and the cinematographer for this and the director for it. So they bring in all of the technical side from Eon Films.
Yeah.
And all of these are these old British farts who don't care about anything and who are going to shoot straight. And they're just like, yes, so Albert Broccoli was dreadful making this movie. He made these demands here and there. He's like, I love Albert dearly, but he was just a total ass. In this process.
Albert Broccoli, cunt. Barbara Broccoli, Countess. Roger Moore, cunt.
Well, it really is that sort of thing where you have the director just being like, and here I was attempting to get George Lazenby to do this on set, and he absolutely refused. He was a fucking prima donna, and I am not surprised that he was not asked back. Like, it's like these moments, it's all of these things where they are being like, not only blunt, but horrifically blunt. Yeah. Like they are clearly upset that they were, as British professionals, they were not being respected.
Yeah.
Like there's just such a wonderful candidness to them that is so hilarious to listen to.
It was like that Harold Sakata fella, though. Stand up, fella. Good chap.
And that's what stands out, is like there are the moments where they are, because it's like they put compliments where compliments are due. And for the most part, it's like the crew that they get for the commentary tracks. Most of the crew are on good terms with each other, but they all unite around the fact that Sean Connery was just being a total shit in this particular scene.
I could see it. I mean, I could totally see that.
Yeah, there's something deeply, deeply funny about that, where it's like, and I feel like you have difficulties with actors sometimes, where it's like you can't quite get what you want out of them. And you have to imagine it was different in the director's head, and it's just not playing out on set. Like, you have the detectives in this movie that are like clearly supposed to be kind of gruff, or like gruffer individuals. Like they're supposed to be a little bit of a hardness to them, and they just cannot bring it out. They can't.
Well, I mean, the one fella has plucked eyebrows and bladed sideburns, so there it's like that is an actor. Like, sure enough, he's the one guy on IMDb with a photo, and the other guy's the director's father-in-law, mustache cop. So we have eyebrows cop and mustache cop.
Yeah, so mustache cop. There's a portion near the end of the film where he's like calling in backup, and like he cannot muster a yell. Like maybe he's just too nice of a guy to do it, or like he's a little embarrassed on screen.
So apparently they had a very obnoxious woman next door to where they filmed a lot of this movie who called the cops on them and was just really a terror to them. They bring her up many times on the commentary. So it could be he was embarrassed and didn't want to make a scene or something.
Woman next door, cunt.
Yeah. Exactly. She comes up like 6 times on the commentary. They keep talking about her. They keep ragging on this lady. That and the film students, apparently, that they got to man the camera and the boom mic for some of the scenes in the movie. To no one's surprise, our director and Rich George did not go to film school, as far as I know. Rich George did go to stunt school, though. He does do a full full body immolation gag towards the end of the movie.
That was nuts. I'm like, wow, like nobody does that anymore.
Yeah, that was cool. That was a cool thing. There's a lot of cool things in this movie. A lot of them centered around effects work, but apparently, like they both kind of have that I don't know, that blue collar mentality towards quote film students, because they really like said some pretty nasty things about some of the crew members that they recruited from, like, I imagine like a community college or nearby college or something.
Yeah, that's sort of the thing with I've often joked that and it's becoming more and more true as time goes on. I often joke that there are three groups that ruin everything for everyone. It's nerds, artists, and conservatives. I am all three.
Oh no.
I am all three, so I feel like I could speak with some authority on it. There is something to when you just want to get a movie done and you just want to get the shot. We just want to get the shot. Just let's get the shot. And some guy from film school is like, well, we need to call the shot. Is this a tail take? Should I put the slate in at the end? I'm like, just get the shot. There comes a point where like the process and the idea of what it looks like to be on a set making a movie gets in the way.
Yeah.
And you're like, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be in the can.
Yeah.
Especially when you're just trying to get a shot somewhere. Yeah. Like, this is a meaningless shot.
Yeah.
Meaningless. It will be on screen for 2 seconds. I remember being on a feature, and it was a full professional crew. And they spent like 2 or 3 hours on a shot of a woman opening a closet and grabbing a gun out of the closet. There is no dialogue.
Oh.
It is a 15-second shot.
Oh, no.
And they're like rolling audio.
Why?
They're like misting the room. They got fog in the room. It's like, well, it's to give it a little bit of atmosphere. And like, I was losing my doggone mind. I'm like, it's an insert.
Yeah.
It's an insert.
Yeah.
This could be done while somebody else is setting up lights for the next shot. This guy could take the camera off the tripod and just get it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was... film school isn't bad. It's that when people have the mindset of capital A artiste, like you are the audience, I am the artist, I outrank you. Like you get into this mindset where you end up handicapping what you are doing.
Yeah.
And I can totally see why people get upset with it. And I get upset with it, where it's like, this doesn't need to be the way that you think it needs to be. And there's a time for process, and now is not the time for process. We just need to do the thing. Please help me help you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I could totally see that being a problem on the set. Where, like, if you have not only people with that mentality, but the need to push back on the decision-making process, where it's like, buddy, you have your job, you have your title, I have mine, and this is not the place for us to be stalling right now. Like, just get the shot, like you said.
Yeah. And there comes a point where it's just like you just need to plow forward. And it's like, I'm not sure if that was these guys' experience on it. But it's like, it's, again, I'm not going to claim any sort of like ultimate authority over any of this, but speaking as someone who I feel I have a foot in both worlds, where it's like, I feel like I can understand both mindsets. There are times where I love the technical aspects of, like, I went to film school, I have production experience, I did this, that, and the other thing. I hate the mindset. the mindset of it, this very frou-frou kind of like, it's the processing of things. Another set that I worked, which was like union, like it was professional, like the cinematography team. Don't ask me how this happened. The cinematography team for the short film that I obtained the location for, we shot in the basement of a church that I was attending at the time. This guy managed to get the pieces of the cinematography team that shot Wonder Woman. Like, they brought in a red camera and they had like union actors and all this stuff. And it was like this big, like it was this crazy thing. Like they were laying down track to get like these shots and everything. But the problem is, so we have a union camera crew and union actors, but it's a non-union everyone else crew.
Weird.
So it was all of us. It was Charm City is filling in all of the other crew positions, and we're all indie. Like, we're all small time, like, get the shot, get it done, just go, 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 go.
Yeah.
And I remember, because I was brought in, because I was not only sort of the guardian of the location and guardian of the set, because I was the one who obtained permission for it, but I was also helping on the production side, because my friend Kelly was running the art direction for the movie. Fairly simple thing. It's like it was a story of like people being in AA, essentially. And I remember my friend Matt was the AD, and he comes out and he's like, "Okay, everybody, well, you know, let's get the shot. Let's get our first shot of the day. Let's get it in the can. Camera, speeding, sound, speeding." Nobody moves. And he's like, "Camera." Camera. And they like, one of them turns and is like, "Say rolling."
Oh,
the correct terminology is rolling.
Wow.
And it's like, and I'm camera one rolling.
Wow.
And he's like, camera one rolling, and he's like, rolling. And it's like, sound speeding, and the sound engineer was one of ours. Speeding.
With bells on.
It was just, it was one of those things that you had this crew that was so hung up on the terminology and the process and the professionalism. And again, they're getting tracking shots for like a nothing burger indie movie with a red camera, and they're laying down track.
Yeah.
Like physical track. And they have this whole freaking thing where it's like, I remember we were on lunch, and it was a gal with a slightly foreign accent, and she's like, AFI is the only film school. It is the only film school. Every other place merely has a film course. You cannot learn proper film outside of the AFI. Like, I was standing there, I'm like, I have a donut in my hand. And I'm like, you know, I'm a wallflower to this conversation. And there was a union photographer there who was taking photographs of the set. And she walks away because they call her to set for the next setup. And the guy turns to me, and he has 3 cameras on him strapped across him, 2 film cameras and 1 digital. And he turns to me, he's like, "Hey kid." I'm like, "Yes." And he's like, "What film school did you go to?" I'm like, I just make movies, man. I just kind of wandered on set and I learned how to make movies. He's like, "Yeah, you save yourself a lot of fucking money." And I'm like, this guy gets it. Yeah. This guy gets it, because he was an older guy, probably in his 60s, who has clearly been around the block over and over and over again, and clearly knew this set was a shit show, because you had this like total clash of run and gun indie filmmakers trying to work with these total snobs who were just burning daylight, where there was hours where parts of the cast were just sitting there doing nothing on an independent movie. And I'm like, how much did this cost this guy? Because that's a red camera. That's a real deal camera. And this is a real deal camera crew. How much is he paying? And it was just, and the actors he had were actually kind of a big deal in the local area. Like a lot of them had worked on like House of Cards and everything else because that had filmed in the DC area. So it's like these were proper union actors who had worked with real stuff and real people. And it was just a total disaster of a set because it was a clash of culture and nobody knew how to just get the shot.
Mm.
And it stood as such a sharp contrast because a friend of mine did a similar setup where she filmed a comedy about a support group, and very similar setup. It was actually filmed in the same space, in the same basement. We were done in 4 hours. And the movie looks great. Movie looks great because stick, move, stick, move, stick, move, stick, move, boom, 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 boom. You get one of those Steadicam gimbals, and you just get your tracking shots that way. It was simple, painless, fun, breezy. Everyone was laughing and joking, and it was a totally different atmosphere because everyone was willing to say, listen, we're just making a movie, and it's not the biggest thing in the world. It's not the craziest thing in the world. There is a chain of command, but no, there isn't. But yes, there is, but no, there isn't. Where everything was informal and it was about getting the shot. There's no ego. There's no ego on a set like that. And again, I don't know what Brian and Rich George's experience was with film school kids, but if I had to take a guess, it was probably something like that, where they were in a situation where they just needed to get something done, and these guys were dragging their feet, or they claimed expertise that they did not have. And you just kind of end up in this situation where you thought you had a sure thing, and now nobody's having fun because it's a total mismanagement of the culture of it.
Yeah, from what I gathered from the commentary, it was a mix of both, where it's like a clash of mentalities and an upsetting of the hierarchy, coupled with, maybe a sprinkling of unexpected incompetence. It sounded like some of the boom mics in particular, like the movie, as you had mentioned, Levi, sound is a glaring weakness in basically the entire production. Apparently parts of that were acknowledged by the director himself. Like in editing, it was something he knew. It's not something he was ignorant to. And part of it had to do with negligence on his part. I did mention there was an instance where half of a conversation was missed because he forgot to plug in the mic. But then part of it, he said that there was somebody mishandling a boom mic. They were jostling it, and it was creating noise. It was creating pops and all that business. There are quite a lot of audio pops on the soundtrack for the film, unfortunately. But he tried to compensate for it with lightning strikes. With thunder strikes. Like he strategically placed those to cover some of the pops, but unfortunately you can't do that for an entire movie.
Well, and so the issue is that's actually one of the post-production sound is also freaking weird on it, because there's a drum track that plays over like the first rising of the proper zombies out of the graveyard. Yeah. And it is improperly looped.
Oh no! So there's a harsh like cut in it.
Yeah, so you'll have a drum who's
oh god, that's terrible.
It's overlaid where it wasn't looped correctly, so there's a clear stutter stop where the beat goes wrong, where it's trying to reset.
Eesh.
And then so you have that combination combined with the dinosaur noises of the
there's at least one Doom sound effect in the movie.
Yeah,
a demon noise.
Yeah. There's a handful of like really weird choices when it comes to
the punch. The punch sounds are the cherry on top. The cartoon sound effects, just like it's straight out of like the Warner Brothers library or something.
Yeah. There's just so many there's so many strange choices to it. But it's like, but then there's moments where you actually kind of get moments where like the artistry actually kind of shines through, like green as a symbol of evil.
Yeah.
Like the rising sort of sickness of green as it slowly makes its way into the color palette of the film.
Yeah.
And it's like, so you have moments like that, and you have moments with the makeup effects and the stunt effects, and you're like, there's vision. It's just we don't quite have the means of achieving it yet.
I think it's that, and also I think our director, who wore so many hats on the production, only some of those hats truly fit. And in order to get it done, though, he had to wear all those hats. And I could totally see him being more successful as, say, and just purely an effects guy. He admitted to no one's surprise that he did not plan to act in the film, but out of necessity, you do that. He claims that the lead actress in the film was selected because she lived within 20 minutes of where they were shooting, and most of the other candidates lived an hour away, and he was afraid she wouldn't come back or she would ditch the production or something. So it's a logistical concern.
Yeah. she was not chosen for her tracts of land.
He doesn't explicitly state it, but it's pretty clear. I mean, based on some of the casting of some of the other women in the film. By the way, this film actually makes use of stock footage from some of his other films. That opening sequence that you mentioned, the awkward, very long one in the graveyard, that was shot for a different film that he never actually made. And the swimming pool kill, that was shot for that same other movie. So he shot elements for a totally different thing that he just inserted into the edit of the movie.
I can appreciate that.
No, it's his material, find a destiny for it.
Well, exactly. I mean, it's like, you ought not to let anything go to waste. You use every part of the buffalo.
Yeah.
It's that swimming pool kill is kind of weird to me because there's like, it's practically silent.
Yes.
There's like no scream to it. There's no struggle. Again, it's like it's coming into the sound to like really kind of sell a scene, where it's not even that it's bad in concept. It's just that it's like there's no noise to
it's
it.
Awkward.
That's there are a couple of kills in this movie that are just awkward. Yeah, where it's like you're not horrified. You're just kind of like
the barfing up the placenta that turns into a lady zombie that then tears the lady in half. What did you think of that, Levi?
So let me check my notes here. Alex hatches a lady from a bag in his mouth that literally tears his girl in half, was what I wrote.
Yeah. That is the thing that happens.
Which is an apt description. So that happens. It's one of those things that it's when a friend describes a project they're bringing forward to you and they're like, it's Lynchian. I'm going for a David Lynch thing. Run like hell. You do not want your name on that. Go far away. It's because it becomes a thing where it's like, I want to be surreal, but the issue is that you lack the perspective of a guy like Lynch who has a point to his surrealness. And that's one of those scenes that is so bizarre and confusing, and it descends so fully into madness. And again, this is where sound effects would help, because so Alex births a woman from a placenta he spit out of his mouth.
Yes.
And she emerges, and then she tears his wife in half. But the thing is that it's like, so you kind of want a little bit of like some reaction, and there's like no screaming. There's no
Nope.
like it's as if she goes into shock immediately because there's a part of you that almost wants the Day of the Dead, like choke on it. Like
That's clearly what it's referencing. Yeah.
yeah. There's a handful of like various zombie movie references, like him taking the saw to the circular saw to the zombie is clearly Evil Dead 2 with the
Yeah.
there's a couple of moments like that, but it's the thing is that the effect he builds is pretty good.
Yeah.
Like, because you have like a rib cage and everything, and it's like, the spine is severed, and it looks pretty nice. The problem is that it comes away way too easily. So it's just like it's as if it's on like a platform with wheels, and it just and she's in half now. It's like it took no effort. It's like they were peeling an orange. It's so strange.
It has no weight to it.
Yeah.
And there's no real viscera for the most part. It's most like there's very clear white bone, like not covered in gore, even just like brushed, clean, polished bone. And logistically, apparently, a big part of why it looks that way probably is that those two actresses were never in the same room together. So the act of actually pulling the bottom half of the torso off of her had to be shot in like really tight close up where you don't actually see it. You don't actually really see the effect. It's just a strange close up of meat pulling away in a blanket.
Well, I guess that's one of the reasons why I say is you make the scene chaos. It's like you kind of need to have it be there's like screaming and there's like breaking things, and when you pull some latex skin apart as it's split. So you use the language of filmmaking and the language of editing to imply that something absolutely horrible is happening. The problem is that it's like two wide shots and it's deathly quiet. So it's like all of the artifice is totally stripped away, where you're like, wow, that's a neat effect. And that's the only thing you're saying. Like, wow, that's kind of neat. When it should be horrifying and awful.
Again, to no one's surprise, like I think our director is better suited as an effects guy than, say, a director or a sound person for that matter. If you had someone else with competency and equal enthusiasm to him doing those portions of the production, I bet you'd actually have something halfway decent because someone else, at the helm of directing a scene like that, asking for those shots. Not just saying, "Oh, this would be wicked awesome," and then just like shooting what they have and then moving on. It would have been a lot different, I think.
Yeah, it's one of the things I specifically wrote down in my notes is the most peaceful zombie deaths on film.
Yeah. They're very sedate. Like there's not a whole lot of brutality or like violence. It's just like blood, just blood, just stuff.
Somebody just dies. But the thing is that it's not like clinical. Like there's not like a clinical edge where you're just like, oh my goodness, somebody just dies. But because it's like somebody like a Coen Brothers movie can be clinical in a kill. Like it doesn't milk it. It's just matter of fact. The thing is that this movie like clearly wants to be a little more sensational, but we don't quite have the tools to pull it off.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's funny is that he has seen a lot of the same movies that you and I have seen. Like he's clearly a fan of Sam Raimi and Evil Dead and Dead Alive. Like Peter Jackson films is clearly something he probably has an affinity for. He's wearing a fucking David Fincher 7 shirt, so clearly he's seen that one.
Yeah, somehow he found that, and those shirts were printed.
No, he claimed he was looking for just a t-shirt without any symbols or iconography on it, but for some reason that's what he's put on. But what's interesting is that like clearly there's an affinity for those things. He's referencing those things, but he's not wholly imitating the entire substance of those things. The energy, the intent is there. It's just the details aren't. Like Sam Raimi, his cinematography and his editing, his shot choices, his camera movement is what I think of when I think of Sam Raimi. And we don't have that here. We have a lot of handheld shots where it's just kind of like listless, just point and shoot. Like there's no real intentionality behind the framing and stuff. Have you seen a Japanese movie by the name of Versus, Levi?
No, I haven't.
It's from the year 2000. It's from director Ryuhei Kitamura, and his energy, the style of cinematography, the camera movement in particular, like it's something he's actually derided for, is the camera's always moving. And he's more of an action director than a horror director, although he's worked in both genres. Versus starts out as a zombie movie, and it has that Raimi energy to it, where there's an enthusiasm and an agility to the way the shots are composed and executed that I think would have gone a long way towards making some of the more extraneous bits of this one, some of the more just like exhibitions of effects work, just come across as more cohesive and more impactful.
Well, because the movie lacks in general a kinetic edge.
Yes.
It needs to drive. It needs to go forward. It's what you really kind of need. I mean, you need it in a movie in general, but dude, for independent cinema, you need it 10 times more. You need to drive forward because you don't. The worst thing. Okay, let me gather my thought here. Independent cinema, at least in my experience, and from the people that I talk to that are both other filmmakers, people who are just your average run-of-the-mill folks, like what people would call normies and everything else. Indie film is not derided for being it's not derided for being stupid or inherently poor or anything. You want to know what's derided for the most? Being boring. It is dull.
Yeah.
It is profoundly dull, because the thing is that the same people recognize the same ideas of the impact and the love of these filmmakers who are masters and who have great talent and great cinematographers and great lighting that take their time.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens in independent cinema most often is people end up trying to be meditative, but they don't have the skills to show it as meditative. They just end up making a profoundly boring film. And what Brian has done is not make a boring movie necessarily, but he has made a plodding movie.
Yeah.
It just kind of meanders from place to place. And it's a shame because, and I keep saying it over and over again, because I want to impart to our listeners that this wasn't a hack job.
No.
This wasn't made by somebody who is trying to make a bunch of money from it. This wasn't made for the success and the accolades and everything. There was nothing delusional about this production. It's just that they did not have the tools, and they thought they could get away with things that they cannot because they do not have the tools and they do not have the experience to do so. I don't have the tools or the experience to do so. That's why I don't write movies like that. It's like, it's one of the things I've accepted, that it's like, I don't write straight drama very often, because I'm like, I do not have the confidence that I can pull off a straight drama picture. What I can pull off is something that may be kind of funny. Like, I can pull off a little bit of suspense here and there. Like, I can do that, but it's very, very difficult to make two people in a room talking, exciting, and driving forward. And the things you need for that is very good writing and very good actors. And often on an independent production, it's very tough to get those things.
Yeah, and they most certainly didn't have that here. What they did have, though, was enthusiasm and friendship. That's mostly what I see. Is you kind of actually described this in some of your happier experiences working with the indie film crews. There's a momentum, there's an energy, there's a moving forward with the production. There's several instances in this film where you can tell that this is Rich George and Brian Paulin having a good time. Like, I got a big nostalgia hit when Detective Eyebrows is in the bathtub getting chopped up with the axe, because I don't know if you had this experience, like running around with a camera, but when I was a teenager, that was what I was doing. I was making gun deal gone bad movies with airsoft guns, which are seen on camera in this film quite a lot. And every single one of them would end up invariably, in the bathroom, in the bathtub, because that was the one place where we could freely spray blood on the wall and clean it up after the fact before my friend's mom got home.
That's the key.
Yeah. And stuff like that is where the movie shines. It's just like you said, they did not have the tools beyond their enthusiasm. Brian Paulin does actually seem to know his way around effects and makeup, for sure. But when it comes to composing a narrative and actually structuring scenes and actually making a film, lighting a film, editing a film, there's some missing parts there. But if you were to put him together with the correct tool set, with maybe people that those tasks could be delegated to, or he could be beholden to, he strikes me as maybe the kind of person that maybe has to direct his own movies in order to make them, because there's a lot of personalities like that. But yeah, just the tools weren't there. But they gave it their best shot, as far as I can tell.
And that's the key, because it's really, you can sense the enthusiasm throughout the whole thing. And there's something inherently just fun about watching people, because when the movie actually is moving correctly, when it actually does kind of pick up the pace, you can sense sort of this fun kinetic energy that they're putting forward. And you aren't invested because you like the movie. You're invested because you want to see these two do something fun.
Yeah. I mean, I literally have in my notes with an exclamation point the word stunts. Like, for small things, like when somebody leaps onto a tool, like a desk, like somebody like launches themselves into a wall, or by the time you get to the end, they're flipping cars.
They're flipping cars.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of vehicle stunts.
Yeah.
And there's
some pyrotechnics.
Yeah. Like, they really kind of went the whole way. It was like, because that third act just goes bananas, because the arc of the movie, like, because that second act, people start turning to zombies. The husband, Alex, becomes, like, goes psychotic, and it's revealed that he's the guy who killed the night watchman with the axe for some reason. It's because he's, like, hungering for flesh, and he needs more flesh. And this transformation has made him hungry, which means he steals from the necrogoblins.
His hair grow too.
I specifically made a note of that. I'm like, why does Alex have long hair all of a sudden?
Because it looks wicked awesome.
Wicked awesome.
I'm quoting the man, actually. Yeah.
Incredible.
He thought it looked wicked awesome.
So you get to the point where the zombies rise from their grave. They're terrorizing this house, and the police are called in. All of the police die. They are sent in one at a time, and they are just taken out one by one.
By the way, you know you're having fun when the same actor has a dialogue exchange with himself. There's a bit where a guy is at the top of the staircase, and there's a guy at the bottom of the staircase. It is the same man. The same man is watching himself get killed by a zombie. That's how you know you're having fun. That's how you know you have killed everyone in your cast 5 times over, and now you're to the point where you're literally having an actor between 2 cuts watch himself get killed.
There's a bit in Clerks where they talk about how it's the only time they had to reuse an actor is when they are is the scene where they're doing rooftop hockey.
Oh, okay.
And one of the guys on the ground walks up and says, "Hey, you guys open?" And they both look down. They're like, "Not now!" Like it's that exchange. The player that Dante is talking to is also the patron on the ground who's asking if they're open.
Yep.
So
Not surprised.
It's one of those. It's the only time they had to like fully reuse an actor in one scene, because it's like Walt Flanagan plays like several people throughout the movie. He plays like 5 different people, but they're never in the same scene together.
But there was just that one instance.
Yeah, there's that one instance where it's a direct cut from the scene.
I was like, hey, isn't that guy right there? It's his twin brother. Fuck off.
Have you considered shutting up? Yeah. So Alex confronts the friend Brian. And he says an award-winning line. By the way, underneath this award-winning line, I made the note: Alex may be the worst actor I've ever seen.
Rich George.
Rich George some really stellar dialogue. He monologues to the police detective before he murders him with an axe later, and he says that he cannot control it anymore.
Yeah, he's doing one of those.
He's really going for it. I
think he was trying to scratch his cheek with the axe too, but no blood comes off of it. So he just looks like he's vibrating against a piece of metal.
Yeah, it's very strange. But so he has Brian. He has Brian on the ground on his knees, and he's like yelling at him that he's like, "How could you do this to me? You gave me this cure." And he's like, "But it saved your life. It cured your bone sickness." And he yells the line, "You turned me into a fucking necro junkie."
Yep. Yes, he did. Necro junkie. That's something people say in everyday life, you know. People know that terminology.
So it's one of those things where I'm like, so is this where the script ended, or was that written?
I suspect that wasn't written.
Because it makes me genuinely curious, because I'm like, okay, were they like, at what point did they decide that Alex is now crazy and has like a weird vampiric thing and is murdering people with an axe, and also he is quote unquote a fucking necro junkie?
When they decided it would be wicked awesome for him to do that. That's the answer.
Yeah, and it's there's a lovely effect where Brian peels his own face off.
Yeah. Made me think of The Fly 2, if you've seen that one.
I have not. I started watching it and I said no. And I shut it.
It is not the same movie as the Cronenberg one.
Well, I was like, oh hey, Eric Stoltz is in it. I mean, we can give it a shot. I mean,
Eric Stoltz in heavy makeup never happened.
Never. Not even once.
Eric Stoltz never quite made it back to the future.
He never quite did. You know?
But yeah, very mean-spirited movie, by the way. The Fly 2.
Yeah, that doesn't shock me.
Yeah, like it goes some places, like especially if you got like hang-ups involving violence done to animals. Like I know there's a whole website dedicated to that. Like I think it's like, does the dog live or does the dog die or something?
Yeah. I felt so bad. It was a little bit of a thrill for like a movie viewing. But at the same time, I was like, I felt really bad afterwards. Me and a group of friends watched The Thing.
Oh, okay.
And none of them had seen it, but I had. And the scene of the dogs like splitting open and all this, my best friend's now wife left the room and vomited.
Oh, wow.
He was so disgusted. And it was like, and she's like, I had a great time with the movie. I just didn't know that was going to be there. Where it's like, it's kids and animals for her. It's like she doesn't jive with it, and she didn't know that was coming, and she just had such a visceral reaction. And there was a part of me that it like was kind of filled with a very sick glee of like, jeez, like this movie made her throw up, but at the same time I'm like, oh wow, I'm a bad person.
Meanwhile, I'd be like, she put in for the pizza, right? It's like she's not getting away, right?
Yeah, it was really kind of crazy. And afterwards, she's like, "No, I mean it's a great movie, like really, really well done. It took me completely off guard."
Yeah. I mean that's the whole intention of that scene. It's like,
yeah.
Are you ready for this? Because this is what it's gonna be.
Yeah, there's something to having like, and I think the thing is, of course, the gold standard, like even the First Fly is a gold standard of just like gore effects that are backed up by absolutely every single part of the production. And that's kind of what kills me about this movie is that there's a lot of like, listen, Brian peeling his face off should be horrifying, and it isn't.
Yeah, he did it apparently because it was an effect he'd never seen before or didn't recall seeing, and for novelty, that's why he pursued it. But there's just a lack of impact to it. It's shot very matter of factly, and there's no. You've emphasized this countless times already, Levi, but the sound isn't there. Like you don't feel the flesh tearing. It doesn't have the real impact to it. It just kind of happens. And oh yeah, by the way, the score for this movie is also done by Brian. Seems like a fine musician, has a band.
Yeah.
But that droning piece of music that plays over the entire second half of the movie is just a little bit too repetitive. I'm going to have nightmares about it. I did not really sleep last night, and I have to imagine part of it had to do with that being drilled into my brain for 40 minutes.
There just comes a point where I really think it's sound. I think sound affects this movie so much. I know we keep harping on it. I know we keep hammering on it, but it's like sound is so important in a movie.
Yeah.
It's so doggone important. And being able to layer sound and mix sound and get it to a point where everything works. One of the things I learned fairly early on, like I was mixing the sound for my first movie, which is like, it's not great. It's not great when it comes to sound. But it's something I realized while I was doing that I'm like, oh, you can't just put one sound effect in, or else it sounds really freaking strange. It sounds really weird if, glass is breaking and it's glassbreak.mp3 and it's clink.
Yeah.
It's weird. So it's like, okay, so what you actually have to do is glass break MP3, then another glass breaking sound, and then glass against wood, glass against concrete. And then you have to mix it to one side of the room, one side of like the speaker set. So when somebody hits it, it's first impact, second impact, third impact, the tinkling of the glass afterwards, and then you can hear it cross the soundscape as you're doing it. The sound of a laser gun isn't just pew. It's the sound of the battery revving up. It's the sound as it reverberates through the air. It's air is igniting as it goes around it. So there has to be a slight sizzle and fizzle to it. And it gives you a full-throated like type noise that has layers to it. And I think that's one of the other issues with, and maybe it was the time period, maybe it was the way that digital cutting suites were being used at the time, or just what he was using. There are times where you can tell they can only have one audio track at a time.
Yeah.
Where the music will be happening and a sound effect comes in, cuts the music entirely, sound effect ends, and the music comes back.
Yeah, I have to imagine it's a technical issue, like a limitation, honestly. Like, it could be that he had only 1 or 2 audio tracks available to him.
Yeah, and I just had to wonder, I'm like, okay, so it comes right back down to tools. It's like there is vision, and then you need the things to execute your vision. And the things he needed to execute his vision just were not quite there yet. Truth be told, I would be kind of interested in seeing something that he directs a little later, if only because the DSLR revolution has happened and digital editing suites are so good and you can get pretty decent microphones for cheap. It's like, I would be interested to see what he could do with a more full tool set. But at the same time, the only things that make this movie worth watching are the homegrown 2004 charm aesthetics of it.
Yeah,
where
you don't get that 20 years later.
As soon as you throw a digital camera on a production like that, it's meaningless.
Yeah,
like it just loses so much of its charm and fun and intrigue, and it just becomes sterile and strange.
Yeah, apparently he is taking a look at his IMDb. Apparently he has worked as both actor and director since 2004. He actually has a film as director currently in production called Abysmal Purgatory. He directed something called Septic in 2022, and I kind of skimmed over it at the top, but he does have an Instagram account, and he is on YouTube. Morbid Vision Films is on YouTube. Brian Paulin himself does have a YouTube channel. I've not watched any of his content. And Levi, he has a video about his Laserdisc collection.
Beautiful.
You should look it up. I'd be curious to know what he gets into or what he has. Like, he seems affable on the commentary. I don't know what has changed or if anything's changed the past 20 years, but he's on YouTube. He's still working as a filmmaker in some capacity. So I actually wouldn't mind taking another look at this fella after we've talked about him for a few hours.
Yeah, I agreed. And that's the thing. It's like, I think that's kind of what cements it for me, of how much that this is passion.
Yes.
Who wanted to make this movie. And yeah, I looked at his IMDb as well. I'm like, holy crap, he's still rolling. He's still doing this. Where it's like, he made another movie, and it was funny because I specifically wrote this down when I realized, oh my goodness, it's the same guy. I directed a movie about like angels and demons called At Dawn They Sleep.
Okay.
Which was screened for us at the VHS Fest Drive-In Film Festival. And Saturn Films, I believe, released it. On their specific label, they released a Blu-ray of it, and it's real kind of gussied up and everything. I didn't particularly care for it. But it's one of the, because here's the thing, it's pure edge. It is like real edgelord stuff where it's just like, it's like, we killed an angel, and guess what? The angels are like, they're lame and just as bad as the rest of us. So it kind of has like some real like early 2000s skeletons with guns edge to it. But it's everyone around me really seemed to enjoy themselves. So it's like, maybe I'll check it out again. Maybe we'll look at it. Maybe this is the start of a new series where we just truck through this man's filmography, and then we try and bring him on the show.
Oh my God. I don't know if I'd survive that, but yeah, I wouldn't mind checking out more of his stuff, because the key word there is passion. There's many instances on the commentary track, like I said, having to do with the face peel effect and stuff. Part of why they did this was, one, for fun, and two, because there was enough of a vision that there were certain beats, there were certain effects, there were certain shots that they wanted to realize in some capacity, because they, to no one's surprise, these are gore hounds, these are horror fans. They in the special thanks at the end of the credits, they cite like every horror magazine you've ever heard of at the end, like in the end credits, they're acknowledged. So these guys are hardcore fans of this stuff. But a lot of it came down to, I have an idea for a gore effect. I've not seen it before. Maybe I've seen something evocative of it or close to it, but I'd like to have an excuse to put that in a movie and maybe have some fun with my friends while I'm at it. And making movies on any level is an endurance. It's very difficult. And the fact that they actually got it to feature length, like even though it's padded all to hell with effects work and stock footage of other movies they didn't actually finish making,
and
they still did it.
And over long sequences of the various actresses, which bared all for the production. All. There's one shot where Brian is manhandling the corpse of a naked woman onto a tarp, and I'm like, and I'm sure Brian took no joy in this. I'm sure Brian was just completely like, I do this for the art.
I have my 22-page script, you see. It's a work of fine art. There's a vision at work.
22-page script. Now get down on the top, honey. You're in the moving pictures.
No, so like planning doesn't seem to be a strong suit, but effects, there seems to be something there. Like, I don't know if he's ever worked strictly like off of someone else's script, or if he's had to like spearhead every element of everything he's ever done. But part of me wants to say, like, narrative is not this man's strong suit. Enthusiasm for gore effects and scenarios, like setups and stuff, seem to be his thing. But in terms of like pacing out a story and creating layered characters and dialogue, I don't think that's where his heart lies when it comes to storytelling. I don't think it's storytelling. I think it's effects. I think it's magic tricks, basically.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like and I'd hate for people to get the complete wrong idea about this movie or about this production or about our enjoyment of it. Here's the thing. The Room is a piece of incompetence.
Yes.
It is truly incompetent from like front to back. It's well lensed. It looks enough like a real movie that it's what makes it so absurd. The fact that the script is just so dumb and it's so bananas. What comes across in a movie like this is not incompetence.
No.
So to speak. Like, it's not, I don't walk away from this saying these idiots don't know how to make a movie. I walk away from it saying these guys did everything they could with what they had. And what they had falls short. And what they had was an excuse to do this. This is a vehicle for this. A friend of mine in the service once described chili as he's just like, chili is an excuse for me to get as much beef and pork into my mouth as humanly possible. He's like, I need as much meat in the chili as possible. Everything else is secondary. I just want spiced meat in my face. And I can't help but think that it's like the chili and the vehicle for making cool kick-ass gore effects is, we need a story, I guess. It's John Romero. Is it John Romero or John Carmack?
John Carpenter?
So many similar names. John Carmack, when working on Doom.
Yes.
Talked about the idea of, there's a very famous quote where he's stories in the video game is like story in a porno. It's nice, it's expected to be there, but it's not necessary. And I can't help but feel like these guys took a similar approach. It's like, okay, we need a story, I guess. We need to wrap something around. We need to have a narrative and a movie in order to make something that's wicked awesome. So I guess I see it less as incompetence and more as just blind utilitarianism, where we need the basics, and here's the basics, and watch me rip my face off.
I think that's 100% accurate. Is that we're not trying to tell a story, we're trying to lay just enough of a framework down in order to facilitate the things we actually want to do. It's an element of writing and storytelling that my brother has always told me that it's the shitty part of writing, where he's like, you can't go from A to D, you have to put the B and the C in there as well, and that's the part nobody actually wants to do. But context always enhances. Like it's always necessary. It's always an enhancement. Doing your due diligence and putting the B and the C there is what makes all the difference. And this movie does try to go A to D, and the results speak for themselves. It's like having a fight scene in a martial arts movie without context or something, where it's just like, it's so much more meaningful and contributes so much more to the impact of the actual physicality of the event if you know why it's happening and what the stakes are.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if it was you and I or someone else within the Discord. We were talking about wrestling.
Oh yeah.
How it's like how wrestling. I am not a wrestling fan. I appreciate wrestling from afar. I appreciate it as an art form and as a form of theater. I think that it is incredibly impressive. The problem is that it is so steeped in history and characters and running ideas and context that I cannot add one more thing to my pile. I can't.
Like comic books. Except like you already have comic books.
Except I already have comics. I don't already have wrestling. So it's like I know just enough to get by and to be able to talk semi-competently about it, which is most things in my life.
Same here.
And we were talking about how I'm like, well, so the thing is you kind of need the theater. You need a story. You need a running narrative in something like that for it to make sense. Is that wrestling needs narrative, or else it's just guys slapping each other. It's just fake fighting, where it's like it's the angle of where the accusation of, well, pro wrestling is fake. It's like, well, no, it's not fake. It's staged, and there's a difference.
Yeah.
But when you remove theater, when you remove story, when you remove the reason, it does just become fake fighting.
Yeah.
It's no longer a piece of art. It's no longer a piece of theater. It's just guys slapping each other, just not hard enough to actually hurt. So it's like there comes a point where you need to have that in order for it to be meaningful.
Yeah.
And it's really the place where this movie trips.
Yeah.
And that was also something that kind of crossed my mind of like, I don't care about any of these people and they're dying horribly. I wish I cared about any of them.
Yeah, it fails to transcend, where it's on, like, what this movie is effects. Yes. Whereas in something like David Cronenberg's The Fly, watching what happens to Brundlefly, you're watching something happen to Brundlefly. It's not purely an exhibition of technical effects work. You're wrapped up in the drama of it. It has meaning. You understand what is happening and what it's doing to a character that you're invested in. Whereas in this one, it's just like, oh, that's somebody spraying blood out of a tube. That's all it is, really, because I don't care who it's happening to or why.
Yeah, and it's just, I don't know. There is... Bone Sickness is admirable.
It is.
It is admirable. There is passion on screen. I'd love to hear that commentary track.
I'll see if I can rip it for you or something.
There's so much that is lovable about Bone Sickness. The issue is that it is couched in layers and layers of technical restrictions that make it enjoyable still, that you still get the charm and the fun, But it also has you questioning why that woman teleported across the room and somehow made lunch in 15 seconds.
In summation, to quote Darkseid from DC Comics, a character I'm sure Levi knows quite well, bone sickness is. So, I think we're about wrapped up.
Black screen of sicknesses.
I mean, what? There's that Canadian movie, Things, that they reviewed on Red Letter Media.
Experienced things.
You've experienced things. You've experienced bone sickness. They easily could have thrown that in at the end. Instead, they had a nifty end credits where they showed everyone in the cast, gave them a title card, and showed their demise, which is fun. And Brian Paulin is most certainly banging something out on the soundtrack over those credits, but it's like 3 minutes. It feels like the end of a Jackie Chan movie or something, minus the outtake angle. It's all footage from the movie itself. But I think we're about wrapped up on bone sickness, but
I think we've done it. I think we've talked more about bone sickness than anyone ever has.
You think I should tag Brian Paulin? You think I should get this to him, or you think he'll be insulted and come for our souls?
I think it would be worth reaching out to Brian and saying, "Hey, we talked about bone sickness. We are not entirely complimentary to the film, but we love what you do."
Yeah, be honest about it, because ultimately that's the direction we trended. Like it's not a mean-spirited conversation. It's an honest conversation.
Yeah, it's like I can appreciate an artist who is operating in an honest direction, who doesn't quite hit the mark.
Yeah.
It's when something is truly like, it's one of the reasons that this drives me nuts, where people talk about, oh, bad movies, bad, and something enters the zeitgeist where someone is like, dude, we should watch Cocaine Bear. It's going to be so bad. Dude, we should watch Sharknado. I'm like, so here's the problem. There's no earnestness in those films.
Yeah.
Nobody was trying to make something good. So when they're stupid, it's intentional. It's sort of like, I'm trying to remember who made this comparison. So I can't give credit. It wasn't me. Somebody peeing their pants accidentally and seeing their embarrassment can be kind of funny. That's kind of amusing.
Yes, it is.
I've seen it. You're like, this is funny. This is funny because clearly they didn't want to do that. Like if somebody was like up on stage giving a grand speech and they pissed themselves, that's funny.
Yes.
Because it is the opposite of your expectation of what was happening, and there's some embarrassment angles. Like it's amusing. Now imagine somebody gets on stage and they're giving a speech and they intentionally piss their pants and ask you to laugh.
They Jeb Bush you. They please laugh. Please clap.
Please laugh. Please clap. Like you'd be like, this person is nuts.
Yes.
This. Like you'd be kind of disturbed almost. Yeah. You're like, what's wrong here?
Like am I in downtown Seattle? What's going on?
Yeah, exactly. Is this performance art? Like because you have no desire to laugh at that point. You're just uncomfortable. So now imagine you are not live and in person, and you're sitting at home watching someone essentially piss their pants intentionally for a camera. You just be like, turn this shit off.
Yeah.
Get it off my screen. And so it's like, that's the kind of thing I can't stand, is when somebody's like, yeah, I wanted to make one of those so bad it's good movies. It's just like, I don't want to watch your movie. I don't. Because you went into it trying to make something stupid. Because you're not being honest with me. You're not being an honest to God artist. It's the last bastion of cowards when somebody makes a horror movie and they're like, it's horror comedy. Because it allows them to deflect and say, I know my movie is garbage and it's not scary.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to try and play it off like the whole time it was so bad it's good. It's a horror comedy. You're supposed to laugh. And it's just like, that's clearly not what you were doing.
Yeah, Tommy Wiseau did that with The Room.
Yeah. You're presenting a film in false pretenses. This is not true to what this thing is. If film is a machine for empathy, then you are manipulating me into this experience. I will not buy in. I can't buy in. It's one of the reasons why The Room works is because Tommy Wiseau was convinced he was making a Tennessee Williams script.
Yeah, that's the earnesty.
He was convinced it was gold.
Yeah.
Like, that it was damn good stuff. And it's like, there's something to that earnestness that makes a truly good, like, terrible picture. Even if somebody knows that it's terrible behind the screens, that people are going for it. They're going in. And
Rich George put worms in his mouth.
Rich George put worms in his mouth and set himself on fire for this movie. Like, there is what I can appreciate about A Bone Sickness and about movies of its ilk is at no point in production did anyone say, well, maybe we could like kind of play this off a little bit. It's like, no, this is going to be wicked awesome. Yeah, put the worms in your mouth, George.
George,
put the worms in your mouth. Yeah. We're going to soak you in kerosene and set you on fire. Like, we're going to crash my uncle's jalopy.
We're going to film you taking a dump.
We're going to film you taking a dump and we're going to put strawberry jam on it. It's going to be awesome. Like, there is such a honest to God, we want to make a damn movie to it.
Yeah.
And I can appreciate that. I can love that because you tried to make something real. And even if you didn't quite make it, I can appreciate an honest to God piece of art.
And I would say that Bone Sickness was an earnest attempt at making somebody's personal art. Maybe it's not entirely cohesive. Maybe it doesn't appeal to everyone in every way, but the earnesty is the difference maker. It's passionate, but flawed as opposed to cynical and apathetic.
Yeah.
And, what more can you ask for?
Well, and at the end of the day, here's my hot take to close us out. I can respect a man who goes out and makes Bone Sickness more than somebody who has better technical skills who says, I want to make a Batman fan film. Because, damn it, you're making something original. There's something, you had a story to tell, and you wanted to make it in a way that was yours, instead of trying to lean on something else, even if it's technically better. Even if I can watch Batman Dead End where he fights a predator and an alien in an alley and it looks really, really cool. I respect Bone Sickness more. Because at the very least, Brian put his all into it. Even if it's not great, it's like he tried an original premise and put his work and time into it, knowing full well that it lives or dies by his efforts. And he made a movie, an honest to God movie. And I don't know, there is something just incredibly admirable about that.
Yeah, it's to bring it back, I guess, to something I said about you, Levi. It's a form of courage unto itself. It's to not take the shortcut of having the A, B, and C filled into you by starting at a premise like Batman or iconography like Batman or Predator or something, and then just nudging it across the finish line with, whatever technical acumen you bring to the table. It's like, no, he presented a complete thought. Maybe it wasn't, the most coherent sentence, but it was a sentence. He got it out.
necro goblin thought.
Yes, necro junkie. we now have that terminology, necro junkie. That's
necro junkie is now a thing that we have in our lexicon, thanks to Brian.
By the way, there's a anti-piracy message at the end of the credits, threatening you with the fate of being turned into a necro junkie zombie should you pirate this DVD. I've not done that, Brian. I've not pirated this disc.
Brian, somebody else posted it to YouTube. It's not my fault.
Yeah, that has Spanish subtitles on it. This is my official Bone Sickness disc.
Yeah, somebody else posted it. I am merely like, maybe I'm guilty by association. I'm sorry. If you
would have gotten it to you if I hadn't disconnected my Blu-ray drive from my PC.
Yeah, it's like if Brian, if you got a Venmo, I'll throw you $2 or $3 for the rental.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Levi. This was a wonderful conversation. It was very nice actually meeting with you, actually chatting with you. Like, thank you for reaching out, because I likely wouldn't have. I'm one of those guys. I'm not so good about extending an invitation to form these connections and stuff. So this is kind of cool. I like this. But before we go, I think Frankie mentioned that you have some projects in the pipe at the moment. I don't know if you would like to take an opportunity to promote any of them here, if you're going to play it close to the chest for the time being. But if you have any plugs you want to make, I have an audience of 5 people, maybe, including my mom, probably, maybe, hopefully.
Well, Trevor's mom, hello. I'm sorry that we said some rather unkind words.
Camera one,
general
cunt.
yeah. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that we called the next door neighbor lady a cunt.
And Sean Connery and Barbara Piccoli and Albert Piccoli.
I would like to apologize to you for having to hear that. So I have a YouTube channel that I've recently rebranded. I'm getting back into the groove of things as far as producing stuff for myself instead of just editing for other people. So I have Your Captain Speaking on YouTube, where my short films that I had done in the past are there. If you guys want to check those out, they're pretty fun. The most recent one is the best one. That's just the thing. Near the Reaper is my most recent short narrative piece, and it's probably the best one on there. Your mileage may vary with the others. But the plan going forward is to make videos about men's action books. There are so many, like we talked about Bond earlier. Every Bond book is under 200 pages. They are thin little books. You can knock them out in an afternoon or on the plane or anything else. And there's so many of these characters that fit into that realm of 200 pages or less and cut to the chase. Just get to it. It's like there's 3 people dead at 5 pages in. It's like, and we're off to the races, and it's just adventure, go, have a good time. It's just here to entertain you. And I feel like nobody's talking about them, which is strange to me because there's such a groundswell of people talking about how it's like, geez, there's no sorts of entertainment for a guy like me. Like you have these people who just endlessly whine about it. Nerds, conservatives, artists. It comes back to that idea. Where it's like there's 70 years worth of these great short books that nobody talks about for some reason anymore, and they've disappeared from the modern market. So I am making a series of videos about those because it's something that I'm passionate about, and I think it's something that is worth investigating. Because it's like, everyone talks about 80s movies and 80s action cinema and even 70s and 60s action cinema. But it's like, this is the stuff that all of these are based on. And it's not like I'm asking you to read Lord of the Rings. It's like can you take 4 hours out of a lazy Saturday afternoon and read about this guy shooting people. You'll have a blast. It's a ton of fun. So videos about that will be going up as well. So the channel should be in the description when this is posted.
Yeah, I will most certainly put that information in there. But thanks for sharing that, Levi, because we had briefly talked about that on the Red Cow Discord about the project, men's action novels and whatnot. And there is a niche topic that I think you could get a lot of enjoyment and mileage out of exploring. Like, I think you have the tools to make a very meaningful product out of that. So I look forward to whenever you start publishing those videos. And I look forward to seeing you in the Discord, chatting with you and stuff. So that being said, this has been our review of Brian Paulin's Bone Sickness from 2004. Thank you again, Levi, for joining me. This was great fun. We'll catch you next time.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.